Okay. Uh, good morning, good morning, good morning. A fair bit has happened over the weekend in rugby league world in the NRL. Ooh, yeah, Reece Walsh of the New Zealand Warriors getting caught by the police in possession of cocaine, and of course the Cameron Smith, uh, Cameron, I mean Cameron Munster, Brandon Smith video leak, which is implicating them in silly behaviour is the best way to describe it. Now, I've posted a couple of videos in regards to those incidents. I don't believe they're isolated. This is two unrelated incidents, yes, but it's a worrying trend that not only the NRL but a whole host of other sports leagues need to address. We've seen it obviously in the build up to the Olympics with cannabis use being questioned. Should it be on the banned list? Should it, you know, be allowed, considering that several jurisdictions it's completely legal, other jurisdictions it's decriminalised for the user. So the question mark over recreational drug use in sport isn't going away. The NRL is obviously on the defensive. You know, integrity unit are involved, and obviously fans' viewpoints on the integrity unit are one thing. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you staying awake at this time over in upstate New York. Um, Obviously, in regards to what I'm getting at, uh, yeah, professional sport in general has an issue. Now, we've seen obviously with steroid use, Major League Baseball, with the steroid scandal all those years ago, that there is obviously an issue with performance enhancing substances, pro cycling, baseball, athletics, track and field, and a whole host of other sports that normally take Olympic sports, as I call them, have had issues with performance enhancing um, drugs, and rugby league and rugby union and the NFL and the NHL. They're not immune from that. Um, but the issue over recreational drug use and alcohol problems as well is very real. There's been a high number of high profile players in team sports and athletes in general who've um, had issues in regards to substance abuse. Do I personally think cannabis should be legalized in on a in pro sports or off the ban list? I think is the best way to put it. Let me think on that one. Um, Now, Dan, I'm assuming you're newer to the channel. I know you've obviously been on a fair few live streams and you've left comments on videos, but I've been discussing the issue with recreational drug use and alcohol and drug problems, so to speak, and professional sport. Now, at the moment, it depends on the jurisdiction on a legality issue when it comes to marijuana or cannabinoids is the best way to describe them. Yeah, it depends on the jurisdiction you're in. On a sporting standpoint, the debate's been had for a while. A lot of athletes use it for pain relief and stress and anxiety. Um, there are gaps in the testing program. So whilst it's still on the scheduled list, just don't use it. It's simple. There are other medications out there to alleviate the issues of ADHD, for example, stress, anxiety, depression, pain relief. Whether they're long term good for you is another debate that's been had, considering that several high profile um, deaths have occurred, in regards to issues with, uh, you know, Derek Bugard is, I think, a very famous one where obviously prescription medication contributed to his death. Um, there was issues with mental health there. Rick Riven, another one. Um, you know, Wade Belak, who I actually had the privilege of seeing play over here in the UK when the NHL was on lockout all those years ago. I had the privilege of seeing him play. So that's just in the NHL. Mike Ribeiro's a player who basically retired from the sport in regards to ongoing substance abuse issues. Um, there are others. Grant Fuhr and Bob Probert in the 80s and the 90s who had issues with drugs. And if you watch the Bob Probert documentary, there's also it touches on his steroid abuse towards the end of his career when his career's winding down. Obviously, tragically passed away quite young. So this is not a new topic. Do I personally think it should be legalised? Well, the debate's being had about just decriminalising altogether and completely legalising and uh, regulating it as alcohol and tobacco is regulated and prescription medication is regulated. There's a further push for complete decriminalisation of the end user, and in some jurisdictions they're going for full legalisation of all recreationals. What you then see is the usage drop, the crime rate drop, the death rate drop. Do I think it should be off the ban list? Um, there is a minority who will have side effects of predominantly mental health. I should know, I am one. Um, so there has to be that pro and con. Um, it it's an interesting question with what's happening with the NRL over the weekend and the scandal that's now embroiled it, which is not anything new. It's not new news. This is just another incident in a list of long line list of incidents. Um, but it is worth considering as a debate, and you have to weigh up the pros and cons. And obviously, the legalisation and the push for legalisation and regulation. Um, it's open for debate. But look, how many more sports drug scandals are we going to see? Um, how many more high-profile athletes are going to have issues with substance abuse? It doesn't matter if the substance is legal or not, regulated or not. Um, this is not a new debate. It's gaining traction, but whilst it's on the ban list, to to take it, whether with mitigating circumstances or not, in the position that professional athletes are in, it's a privilege and not a right. They are role models for young people and community. So it's a slippery slope. You know, if let's say next year it's taken off the ban list, it doesn't take away the fact that so many athletes have been suspended because of it. So you can't retroactively unban them in that regard. So it's a very difficult situation. And again, there's a grey area because it's still a controlled substance, a banned substance, illegal in many jurisdictions. Punishments vary from country to country. There are growing calls to legalise it. At the same time, in other jurisdictions, there's growing calls to increase the penalties for possession, cultivation, and sale. So you're not going to get a consensus across the board. How bad does it look? It's all over Twitter. I've seen the full video. Um, it's it's a bad look for the league, considering all the efforts that the NRL have done to allow the competition to continue. Not a single game since resumption of last May has been lost. No players have tested positive for COVID, so they've done Herculean efforts to get the last year and a half completed. Um, Herculean, and there's still doubts that there's still concerns that the grand final maybe went from Brisbane to Townsville, but you know the efforts that the governing body, Andrew Abdo, who's in charge of the NRL, and Peter V'landys, who's actually his boss at the Australian Rugby Football League, the ARL, have done, it is really bad press considering that Reece Walsh, who's a young player at the New Zealand Warriors, was arrested in possession of cocaine outside a Gold Coast nightclub hours before. And then you have the end of season's award ceremonies, much like you have in major leagues in the US, taking place. Their coach obviously wins Coach of the Year, and he's now fronting questions rather than going, "Well done, congratulations on winning Coach of the Year," and this individual accolade and all that. He's now facing questions over the behaviour of two of his key players, who are in leadership roles at the club, who are key components to have got them where they got in the regular season and in the postseason over the last few years. And it's not a good look. It, it, it's not the worst video. It's not as bad as Kuznetsov in the NHL in the hotel room, although I think it's pretty similar, to be honest. And then here, subsequently, within a few months of that video getting on the internet and resurfacing at the World Championships, the ice hockey 2019, he's caught on a drugs test and is suspended. Now, we don't know exactly when this video was shot. It has to be recently, considering that they have been operating in a bubble kind of situation, very similar to how some of the other leagues in North America worked last year and the beginning of this year in order to resume play and get leagues played. So there's a bubble situation in Queensland. The video surfaces hours before the end of season's awards ceremony. Both players, or all three players, there's another player involved, whose name I actually forget, but he's a squad player. They obviously are present at this awards ceremony. Their body language is very uncomfortable. I think they knew before it hit mainstream media that this was out on social media doing the rounds. It's all over Twitter. The mainstream media in Australia have gone for this. It's in the newspapers, the TV stations, the websites. They got onto this. The way the New Zealand Warriors dealt with the Reece Walsh situation is in the complete opposite to how the Melbourne Storm have dealt with Cameron Munster and Brandon Smith and the allegations. The Warriors have come out straight up going, yep, we're cooperating with the integrity unit. We accept the punishment that's coming our way and the players' way. The young lad, he's only 18, 19, he's come and said, yeah, I accept any punishment that's coming my way and I accept getting assistance for alcohol drug problems. So he's actually admitting he has an issue with drug and alcohol use. So athlete and player welfare again gets brought into question. There is a league-wide code of conduct that was brought in several years ago under the previous CEO, Todd Greenberg, who wasn't great. Yeah, I mean you have to, but obviously I think more is going to come out. I've done a couple of videos on the subject. There's a video I did a couple of years ago in regards to rugby league as a general sport, both Super League here in the UK and NRL in Australia, because I think in the space of a year and a half, we had 9 players in total getting caught, some by drugs testers, some by the authorities. That is a high number, considering that in the UK at least it is there are less registered players than other sports. That is a seriously high percentage of the playing group. Still less than a percent, but if you look at the numbers of registered players who play rugby league in the UK in the top 3 leagues as registered professionals, and then you look at the NRL again with what they call first grade, so the NRL level. If we get to the regional competitions and the feeder competitions, that is a reasonably high percentage for globally a minority sport. I mean, in a couple of areas, is it one of the most popular sports? So, yeah, and these all high-profile players getting caught. This is not a great look for a sport that doesn't have the best global market share, especially the Super League. I mean, the NRL is actually doing quite well when it comes to global outreach, but obviously the World Cup has been delayed by a year because the Australians and the New Zealanders pulled out. So the World Cup, we should be prepping for the World Cup right now. It's been pushed back another 12 months. So yeah, this is a sport that's had a lot of negative headlines. Player misbehaviour. It doesn't matter if it's recreational drugs, steroids, gambling, alcohol, domestic violence, assault, drink driving. There's enough videos on this channel of me criticising players, and I understand there's a mental health aspect and there's mitigating circumstances, but still, this is a sport that regularly every off season there's going to be more players misbehaving in the next 4 or 5 months. There will be. Every off season, there's always at least 5 or 6 incidents which bring the game into disrepute and are investigated. And there are some players who are currently suspended for off-field indiscretions. Jack de Belin was suspended for the best part of 3 years for some of his legal issues that were quite serious. He was found not guilty in the end after 3 trials. I'm not going to go into the Jack de Belin situation. He was suspended again this season for breach of COVID protocols. Um, we've had uh, yeah, a whole host of of off-field incidents, not only this season but in previous seasons and off seasons. So there is clearly a rather toxic culture within the sport. I understand, obviously, being human beings and making mistakes, it happens, right? The Greg English drink driving, he had a history of mental health problems and was only just over the limit. It wasn't if he was completely smashed, but it cost him his captaincy of Australia, um, and it basically sped up the end of his career. Um, and Other players have had a whole host of problems, but it's every off season. This is not anything new. Um, the NRL has an issue with player behaviour, um, and in the case of cocaine use, it's an ongoing. It's like every other season, someone gets caught with it, and it's embarrassing. And this is a league that is on a PR offensive to try and get more families into the game, new fans into the game, try and sell their brand as a family orientated sport. Um, and this damages that image yet further. I mean, last season during the lockdown, players were misbehaving. There were firearms offences, domestic violence, all sorts. Uh, I've definitely fallen out of love with what I call football, what you would call soccer, rugby union. So the 15-a-side game, I'm enjoying a lot less. And rugby union is starting to have the same issues as association football in that regard. There's a lot of issues. Um, I've always loved NASCAR. I like motorsport in general, but I've really got into NASCAR. Um, I like stock car and touring car racing. I don't like open wheel racing. I don't like single seaters. I've fallen out of love with F1. Not a fan of IndyCar, if I'm honest. I'm not a big fan of street circuits, if I'm honest as well, because I don't think they suit motorsport really well. I'm not a big fan of Monaco. I'm not a big fan of Surfers Paradise and the Australian V8 supercars. Not a fan of Macau as a street circuit. The accidents are spectacular, but when you have a crash, the whole circuit's blocked, and then it's not even worth racing the race if you've got to spend an hour clearing up the mess. Sports that have taken a backseat, yeah, association football is definitely. I've don't hate the sport. I'm falling out of love with the sport. Rugby union, um, enjoying it less than I was. I'll still watch the international game, but I think as a spectacle, as a product, uh, considering that I do enjoy rugby league, especially the NRL, rugby league is more fast paced. It's more open. Um, you can have a low scoring game that's really entertaining. I've seen a few of them recently, whereas in rugby union it can become a kickathon. Really confusing for new fans to get into the game, especially in North America where they're trying to grow both forms of rugby in league and union. Um, it, there's too much tactical kicking. The ruck and the maul and the scrums are a mess. There's too many complicated law variations. Sports that I brought into your motorsport, I've always loved superbikes, motocross, touring cars, stock car racing. So I love me NASCAR. I actually do. And people go, "What?" I look a bit like a redneck right now, but I do enjoy it because there's people go, "There's no skill to it." They're doing more road courses to travel at 200 plus mile an hour inches from your opponent, up to five wide on some circuits. Um, you've got to have quite sizable kahunas to do that. Um, it is down to driver skill more than equipment, because the cars are so even. Um, I find it very entertaining. Um, I enjoy it. The fact that um, I've fallen out of love with F1. I have done. I think the regulations, there's too many gimmicks in it. Um, Formula E reliant on road courses, as in street circuits, not circuits. What you would call a road course, what I call circuit racing and street circuit racing. I'm not a fan of street circuits. I never have been in any form of motorsport. It's not that they're dangerous. It's just when you have that one driver who has that prang. It doesn't matter if it's a high speed or a low speed. It just causes a domino effect, and it just blocks the track. I'm not a big fan of some of the modern circuits as well. Too much runoff. I like gravel traps. Car gets stuck in there. Yeah, keeps you a bit more on the island as they call it. Whereas the runoffs, you can just cut the corner and there's less risk involved. Um, so yeah, F1 has lost it for me. MotoGP, because it's become onto subscription only TV behind a paywall, it's lost viewers. I love MotoGP, but I think the TV deal that's been signed over here in the UK at least is not favourable to growing motorcycling and that form of motorsport. I think superbikes and motocross and MotoGP and all those two-wheeled events, because of the TV deals in place, that the FIM and the various British superbikes, Wales superbikes, the TV deals haven't helped. They're no longer on free-to-air broadcasts. You've got to either find an illegal stream or pay through the nose for access to um, subscription internet or subscription TV, and so it's not what it was in the 90s when I believe motorcycle racing was at the forefront of not only British motorsport but global motorsport. Um, World Superbikes was actually superior to Grand Prix racing. It had a bigger fan base. MotoGP has now overtaken that, but Superbikes made the mistake of going behind the paywall, and then MotoGP followed not long after. So that's where I think the balance between free-to-air coverage and subscription coverage still needs to be there. Um, you'll hear me go on about some of the domestic broadcasters here in the UK and in a bit further afield in Europe. I'm heavily critical of the change of start times for European sporting events to suit the US market. No offense to you guys over there in the US, but that has definitely not gone down well over here in the UK and in Europe. It's really pissed off a lot of European fans. Um, oh look, I've not watched any NFL for like nearly 3 years now. But I've watched a couple of the Super Bowls. I used to watch the Super Bowl every year. I don't watch it anymore. Um, there are reasons why I'm not enjoying the NFL, and it's not because of rule changes or anything like that. It's to do with how they dealt with the concussion lawsuit. It's more of a moral standpoint from me. Also, even though the pandemic's going on, they're still going to be having the NFL London series take place. I find that ridiculous. With the fact that there's still a global pandemic and people are still dying and getting sick. Um, there's 5 million UK adults who are still either not wanting to get or refusing to get the vaccine over here. Now, I'm not going to get into the compulsory vaccinations, but I know in professional sport that is being raised in all the professional leagues in North America. I don't know what it's like over here because um, the rules are over here at least, apart from I think in Scotland, Wales, because the UK has got full governments, much like the US with the 50 states and Australia with its territories and states and Canada, countries that have multiple parliaments and regional governance. In England, no vaccine passports. Scotland and Wales vaccine passports come in 2 days' time. Northern Ireland, it's a bit different, partly to do with the political situation, which is complex, and I'll discuss that on the other channel because I don't want to get into a political discussion. But the NFL, on my standpoint, it's more of a moral standpoint with the way they're dealing with the CTE lawsuit. Also, I prefer CFL. If the NFL had the CFL's rules, the game would be a bit more watchable. It's still two stop start. Um, there are too many stoppages in play. You know, the ball is actually in play, not that long. Um, in regards to rugby union, being similar to the NFL, there's two stop start. I do suggest and I do recommend you go on NRL.com and get yourself a subscription and watch every game this season. Just go back to the first match of the season in round one and watch all your way through with the state of origins for both men and women. Watch all the way through to the grand final. Watch the whole season in the off season between this Sunday, sorry, and next March. Just in your spare time, watch it, and then you'll understand what I mean about it being a fast-paced game. There are a few moments where there's controversy. I'm not going to lie on that, um, but I do suggest you you explore all the related media because you get all the other sort of programs that go with the NRL. So for £130 a year for me, which would be, I think would be $175 a year, you get not only all the matches, but you get all the associated programs that are like the panel shows, the documentaries, um, and so I do suggest you check that out, and then you'll see, especially some of the games in the final series, how end to end, 80 minutes. I think there was one game where the ball was in play 65 minutes of the 80, constantly moving with no stoppages. Where it was a close game. It was, I think, 8-6 in the end. It was the Parramatta Penrith game where it was the winner has to win, the loser is out. Like there is no second chance here. And Penrith won 8-6. So I've ruined the game for you, but Penrith are in the grand final, so they would have won that game. But the ball was in play for 65 out of the 80 minutes. And doesn't matter what code, because rugby's split into codes, what version of rugby you're playing, to have ball in play that long consistently without a whistle. Um, and it was a low scoring game. You would think with those possession stats and those stats, it would be a high scoring game. It wasn't. It was one of the most entertaining games I have seen in 20 years. And then the Penrith Melbourne semi final, or preliminary final as it's called over there, the winner goes to the grand final. Again, very similar scoreline. And again, very similar intensity. Some of the best, I will say, some of the best rugby league I have seen in decades. And we've seen some pretty good games in the regular season as well. Um, there were a few rule changes brought in mid-season, which I'm not a fan of. I will do a season review where I'm going to be critical of some of the rule changes and some of the consistency with officiating and suspensions and the citing commissioner and making rules up as you go along, like realizing there's an issue rather than doing it in the off season, doing it mid season. In regards to the NFL and the pace of play, the league has to realize they've got to speed the game up. The NHL realised this. They had 3 lockouts and a player strike to improve the quality of the product because in the mid-90s it was a bore-a-thon. Not going to lie, it wasn't the best time to be a hockey fan. Um, yeah, rugby league has changed rules between 2019 and now. In the last 2 years, a lot of rule changes to speed the game up, make it more entertaining. Both here in the Super League and in the NRL. The NRL is the far better product. I've discussed that to death. Um, you know, uh, various motorsports have brought in rule changes and regulation changes for a variety of reasons. You could argue with NASCAR with the playoff format and the stage racing. I'm not a fan of the stage racing or the playoff format. I think it should just be the best driver wins the championship, the best team wins the constructors. But they brought those rules in to spice things up a bit. They're bringing in more road courses now. For the most of the last decade, it's been 2 road courses per year on the main NASCAR Cup Series. Now it's something 6. So the pandemic has forced them to be more entertaining, forced the sport to go, we need to mix things up a little bit, um, have a slight shift in direction, bring a different challenge in to the drivers and the teams. Um, so yeah, the NFL as a sport and Roger Goodell as commissioner. I mean, yeah, he speaks for the owners, so it's the owners here. I mean, the NFL makes money regardless of the situation, but the league, the club, the team owners, and Roger Goodell need to look at possibly bringing in some rule changes that are protecting the quarterback from late hits and all that, but they need to look at definitely adjusting how the sport's played. And if they look at the CFL on a playing standpoint, it's more entertaining. On a financial standpoint and an economic standpoint, it's in a mess. Um, but the NFL could learn a little bit from how the CFL plays the game. But then the fan base just I don't. It's up to the NFL fan base to be open to accepting a new style of play and new rules in order to speed up the game. Whether they in between downs they speed up how long you have in between sets of play, bringing in a quicker clock, saying you've got less time um, in order to set up your play and defence and attack. Looking at how long the timeout should last, um, coaches' challenges, the whole host of things. But I haven't watched enough NFL in the last 3 years to comment on how the game is played right now. Um, I mean, would you, as an American sports fan, and this is a question I'm going to ask you, Dan, how would you feel about having an NFL team in London? Because I've covered the subject on this channel a lot in the past. I've done a lot of videos on it. I've looked at the stats and facts and figures, and I got the old whiteboard out a few years ago, and I properly uh, went in depth in regards to um, looking at um, yeah, the facts and figures, statements made, um, you know, the plan that the NFL had in place to obviously have a team by now. That was the plan anyway. They were hoping to have a team about a decade ago. Um, you know, what's your opinion on the London series, and what's your opinion on possibly having a London team? The question's also been asked at times, um, other major leagues having a team, not necessarily in London, but somewhere in Europe, and that's Major League Baseball, that's the NHL, that's the NFL, and the NBA. The NBA takes games on the road here. The NHL takes games on the road to Europe. It's been to the UK before. It's been all over Europe, pre-season and regular season games. Major League Baseball was the latest to come over to London a couple of years ago. Weren't that successful. In my opinion, it wasn't the most successful experiment Major League Baseball has had. And the advertising campaign, well, when you got Jimmy Carr, who is a very divisive celebrity over here, trying to promote um, the Major League Baseball London series, that didn't go down well. Um, yeah, they cancelled in 2017. They came a year later. I've covered that as well. It didn't go down as successfully as I think Major League Baseball wanted. What was your opinion on having a major league team over here in the UK or in Europe as part of like an East Coast division or something? I know for a fact the NHL were thinking about having an NHL Europe conference division league where the winner of that would go into the Stanley Cup playoffs. That was an idea on the table. Um, Yeah, it's not just travel. It's bearing in mind, obviously, in the NHL, the salaries are paid in US dollars. In Major League Baseball, the salaries are paid in US dollars. Major League Soccer, all the salaries are paid in US dollars, not Canadian dollars. So you've got to bear in mind, there's an exchange rate. So the British pound to the US dollar, for example, they would also, in order to have a team here, the players would have to be resident here because, yeah, they would have to be resident in the UK for tax purposes because they're here working. So then there's visa complications, which we've seen with the Toronto Wolfpack in rugby league, and there's a reason why that went belly up. Um, so there's a lot of considerations. It's not just having a great plan. There's the tax system over here for high earners. You can only defer so much because they're not self-employed; they're employed by the NFL in reality, rather than just by the franchise. The franchise has the rights to have a team because the NFL basically sells them the franchise rights. It's complicated. Um, then they would have to agree to a stadium, which is why Shahid Khan wanted to buy Wembley at half price, which didn't go down well with us Brits because there was British taxpayer money pumped into building that stadium to begin with. And the FA Football Association, the FA chairman Greg Clark is no longer there. He sort of resigned last year in a racism scandal. Um, yeah, but bearing in mind the NFL Europe, so ELF, NFL Europe failed before twice. There's been two European, American. There's been an American Football League in the '90s here. They failed for a reason. Um, in regards to having an NHL Europe, the the league, the rink sizes are different. they're Olympic size rinks, not NHL size rinks, so the style of play is different um, completely for ice surface. Generally, there are some rinks that are NHL dimensions, but for the most part, they're Olympic World Championship IIHF dimensions. On the the ELF, there's look, NFL Europe failed, and bear in mind the NFL is the wealthiest of the major leagues. It's just able to print money if it wanted to. It's the bank of the NFL. The NBA is actually not as wealthy as people realise. Um, the NFL is a license to print money. Um, in regards, yeah, having an NHL Europe division would be great, but then, yeah, how would the domestic leagues feel about that? And bearing in mind, ice hockey in Europe as a whole is the second most popular sport after football, soccer. So how would the European leagues that are a very good standard, by the way. Plus, we already have an inter-European like Champions League style competitions with the CHL, and there's another secondary competition. So we already have like a ice hockey equivalent of the Champions League and Europa League with the European leagues. Um, the KHL have been rumoured to have a team in London and wanting to have a team in London as well. On the fact that you, as an American fan, you wouldn't overly be bothered is interesting. Um, Very interesting because I've never had a North American um, viewpoint on the European League football, whatever it is, the NFL Europe basically, which is there's a reason why I failed before. Yeah, these are players who haven't even made it to the CFL, and the CFL ain't well paid. May I just add, they couldn't make it to the CFL, then they're not on a very good standard. These are guys who didn't get drafted by either the CFL or the NFL out of college. Um, the CFL players, very few of them make over $500,000 US. Um, very few. So they're not well paid up in the CFL. The average salary is about 65,000 Canadian dollars, which is decent money when it's not a lot of money in professional sports kind of things. Yeah, the standard isn't great. The KHL, I'm not sure how that would work. Um, there's already concern from the other European leagues. There's corruption allegations to do with the KHL. Um, a lot of corruption allegations, and there's a lot of politics as well behind it. Um, a lot of politics. So I'm not sure how the other national leagues in Europe would feel about having another KHL team, especially in Western Europe. And again, there you have to, think in the travel and player welfare, and yeah. Um, and the Boston Celtics CEO was interviewed. I think it was in 2017 or 2018 after the NBA brought a game of the London series over to the O2, which is the former Millennium Dome, and he was interviewed. And his response to the question of having a North American major league have a franchise in London or in Europe, and he said that ship has sailed economically. And he said, yeah, before the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, absolutely, we could um, have a team. But he said the economy has changed. Um, and this is a guy who's obviously got to deal with players' associations and salary caps and collective bargaining agreements. And he was like, "Yeah, there's too many obstacles in the way for it to go ahead. The idea on paper is fine, but there's a lot of logistical challenges. And would the UK fan base, especially with NFL, be happy with just 8 regular season home games a year? And that's not including if the team makes the playoffs." So that's the viewpoint of one of the wealthiest North American franchises there is, saying it wouldn't work, it would cost us too much. In regards to the KHL hockey jerseys, I mean, look, as a European, we are used to advertising on sports jerseys of all sports. Um, the AFL, not so much in Australia with their tank tops, but they still have a fair bit of advertising on them. Rugby league, rugby union, European football, ice hockey. We're used to it. We're used to it over here in Europe. Same in South America with sponsorship on their jerseys. Same in Australia and New Zealand, South Africa. Um, we're used to it. It's not obviously the norm in North American sport, but the MLS and Major League Rugby, they have far less TV revenue. So yeah, for them it is a need to survive. Um, Obviously in NASCAR you have it, and in motorsport you have all the sponsorships. Obviously with Major League Baseball, the NHL, the NFL, the NBA, it's coming. How far those leagues go, it's up to how the economy bounces back. Um, if the economic situation changes, then yeah, I can see it being less of a necessity. But I think they're here to stay now. The advertising that's in place, fans are against advertising on the boards. Um, what the leagues have said is on the replica jerseys and the NBA and the NHL, they won't have the advertising on. I don't know how long that lasts. I honestly do not know how long that's going to last. Uh, because of the shutdown and the fact the league's lost a lot of money, and these are owners who are going, no, we're losing money here. And I'm not saying all the owners are bad people. There are some owners who really are not very nice people. I'm not saying every millionaire and billionaire is an asshole. Some of them are, but they've got to worry about all their businesses and keeping all their businesses afloat. And the losses that were made and the economic shock that the last couple of years has had um, is still being felt. Absolutely, it's being felt. Now, measures were put in place to protect people's employment status and protect welfare payments and such, and more than in previous pandemics or economic crises. But yeah, the advertising is, I think, it, it's been in European and South American sport for decades, decades and decades, 40, 50 years. We've got used to it. Um, I think there's going to be strict rules on what companies can advertise. We've discussed, gambling firms. I mean, Bolton Wanderers are now breaking ties with gambling firms. The issue Bolton Wanderers has is the football league here in England is sponsored by a betting firm. So, regardless of Bolton Wanderers going, we don't want to be sponsored by gambling firms. Their league sponsor is a gambling firm. So, and the football league are trying to come up with, oh, it will cost the league so much to lose the sponsorship of gambling. You find another sponsor to fill the gap. It doesn't matter if it's a car company, a clothing company, a haulage firm. There are other companies that can fill that sponsorship gap. You just choose not to, because for short-term pain, for long-term gain, the governance is just not willing to do it. But if on the legal side, if the government come in and say we're banning this form of advertising, then you've got to find a new advertiser. Um, and so again, the European Champions League, you also get a card for it. Yeah, it's also on Free Sports as well and Premier Sports. And I think you can also find it on some of the YouTube channels that the various teams have. So it is out there. Um, I think it's on Eurosport as well, depending on where you live in Europe, what Eurosport broadcaster you can get. But yeah, that's a good format. Um, it's a different format. It's a format that I definitely think is growing the sport continent wide. The problem with the NHL is that they take our best players, but they don't give enough back apart from a couple of pre-season games and maybe a regular season game. But with COVID, obviously, that's been put on the back burner. But the NHL could definitely do more by pumping money into leagues to improve facilities. They take our best players. They should give more back. That's a personal opinion, but it's a two-way street. But yeah, no, the Champions Hockey League is a good format, um, and they've seen what's worked with rugby union and with European football, and yeah, latch on to a moneymaker. Um, we know that it's the second most popular sport across Europe as a continent. So you're going to have a good viewership figures. They're not going to be as good as football, and in some locations regionally, not as good as rugby. But you do know you're going to have good, solid viewership fan figures. There's good attendances at games, but obviously, depending on the jurisdiction, fans are allowed back in. So there's good atmosphere at games. So yeah, I think it's definitely a good format. I still think there's improvements that the sport can make, um, but yeah, it's definitely one to take note of. Um, Definitely one to take note of. But there's been some very interesting questions coming in regards to how I started the live stream with what's going on in the NRL with the drug scandal that's engulfed the sport yet again, um, and the issue of recreational drug use within the sport. Um, and yeah, so itchy stuff. So yeah, there's definitely some good questions so far. I'm just going to quickly check some of the sports news because obviously with what's going on in the NRL is definitely um, big news. Um, yeah, no, Swedish players. I mean, that's I think the best European league by the Swedish league and the Finnish league are definitely I think a level above the Swiss and the German leagues. Um, and the German and Swiss leagues are pretty good quality as well. The French and British leagues are improving massively. Um, there's an Alpine league that covers Austria, Italy, and Slovenia. That has improved the quality of play in Italy, Austria, Slovenia. Um, the Czech league, obviously, with Jaromir Jagr still playing, has always had good, high quality production of talent and good quality players. So yeah, the quality doesn't matter on skill or physicality. Hey, the players can still fight here in Europe. It's just not as prevalent as in North America. The British league, I think, is a fight fest, um, but it is what it is. Manny Pacquiao has officially announced his retirement from boxing. He's now going to focus on his run for Philippine president. He's done. Uh, Obviously, Real Madrid losing to Tiraspol last night. I think they lost at home as well. Big news there. Um, Porto got hammered at home. Uh, yeah, I think it's the Alpine Hockey League or something. It covers Austria, parts of Italy, and Slovenia. Um, um, Rutherford, the former GB long jump champion, is now part of the GB four-man bobsleigh squad for the Olympics. Um, Obviously, there's concerns still about the Ashes taking place with the COVID protocols in Australia because the women's England netball team pulled out over concerns in regards to the different states' rules in regards to is it Greg Rutherford? It is Greg Rutherford, isn't it? Yeah, Greg Rutherford is now a bobsledder. He's gone from being a long jumper to a bobsledder. That is, and unfortunately this is a guy who's had a lot of injury problems, and bobsledding has a lot of running involved. He's had a lot of issues with injuries, so it'd be interesting to see how he develops. Sprinters do make very good bobsledders, and being a long jumper, he's still got to have a good run up, good sprint side. So he could have been had he not, he's 34, so this is I think his last Olympics. And he's trying to be the first Briton to win medals at both summer and winter. And the men's bobsleigh program is very, very good in the UK. So he has a good chance of being a medal winner. Uh, um, what else? Uh, Oh, horse racing. Johnny Farrelly, trainer permanently excluded from British horse racing in a safeguarding case. Now, this is interesting. Trainer Johnny Farrelly has been banned from British racing after being found to have breached safeguarding rules. Farrelly, based near Bath, has been permanently, so this is a permanent lifetime ban, with no right to review for 7 years. So he's banned for at least 7 years um, by the BHA, which is the British Horse Racing Authority, which is the governing body of horse racing in this country. every country has its own authority when it comes to horse racing. There's no global governing body, another sport that could do with that. Um, he had a 5-day hearing and he was found guilty of 6 offences under the safeguarding rules of young persons and adults at risk, so the protection of. So this is quite. The details haven't been disclosed, so God knows what's happened. He's been a trainer since 2013. He had 5 winners so far this winter, this flat season. He's planning to appeal. Um, he had a hearing in front of the National Safeguarding Panel. Yeah, breach of 6 offences, 6 rules. So that's an interesting one. That's so if you're a horse racing fan who follows it, I don't really uh, follow horse racing that much these days, but I still watch the occasional race when I can. But it's an interesting one. Um, Obviously, Champions League football last night and tonight. There's a lot of games taking place. Um, the Real Madrid defeat to Sheriff Tiraspol is the big news. Um, Also, UEFA are dropping legal challenges against the European Super League, the remaining clubs, because of a Spanish court's decision saying that it was unconstitutional to take Real Madrid and Barcelona to court over that, which is an interesting one. Um, Roger Hunt, World Cup winner with England in 1966, has passed away aged 83. That's just broken as well. There's an article over the Nuno appointment at Tottenham not planning out. I don't think it's his fault, to be honest. That's a longer issue with Spurs. Kante, Chelsea player, has tested positive. N'Golo Kante has got a positive COVID test. So even now, European football, they've still got positive tests. Um, uh, what else? Yeah, so Kante's got a positive COVID test. There's a lot of pressure on Solskjaer. Have you heard of the Saratoga Springs horse race course? Saratoga, that is, I have heard of it. It's home to the Horse Racing Hall of Fame. I live 2 miles away. Oh, right. The fact that like America has to have every Hall of Fame is really annoying. No offense. We invented most of the sports over in Europe. I didn't know that there was a horse racing Hall of Fame, but I know there's museums dedicated to the sport. Where I live in England, not that far. I mean, a fair distance, but not that far. Is a big area for horse race training. We've got Ascot Racecourse and Newbury Racecourse, Epsom, Sandown, all nearby. So when Royal Ascot is on the Derby weekend, Newbury has got a flattened jumps course. You've got Kempton Park up the road, so the King George Boxing Day event. Although Kempton Park, there's issues about it possibly closing down and being sold for development. There's a lot of famous horse race tracks near me. Um, I've worked at Ascot Racecourse more than once, so I have a connection in that sense on working in the horse race industry for a little bit. But yeah, there's the Lambourne Downs uh, um, yeah, well, the thing is, like Saratoga, obviously, is a very historical part of New York State, and you've got the Kentucky Derby and all that. Um, oh, oh dear, random sneezing fit. Uh, but yeah, you got. I mean, the Hockey Hall of Fame is in Toronto. Indianapolis has the Motorsport Hall of Fame and the massive motorsport museum. But I don't think horse racing is as popular in the US as it is in the UK, Ireland, Australia, France. I don't think it is as popular a sport um, as yeah as it could be. I don't know about the viewership figures on TV and you know how popular it is amongst the sporting fan base, the wider sports fandom in the US and Canada. Um, don't get me wrong. There's been some very famous, like you got the Kentucky Derby and a few other famous races, and you've had some very famous jockeys and horses and trainers. But I don't know how popular it is in the wider um, the wider sporting landscape. And I knew about Saratoga being a Revolutionary War battlefield. Didn't know about that. And I know about the French Kingdom of France actually financially aiding the revolutionaries. But ironically, France had its own revolution about a decade later because the war actually was a financial drain on the already weakened French economy. But that's again something for the history buffing channel. But no, Saratoga. I mean, the fact that yeah, I didn't even know there was a horse racing Hall of Fame. And again, horse racing is a sport that gets regularly criticised by animal welfare groups, and it's a sport that is heavily reliant on gambling over here in Europe and Australia. Heavily reliant on it. They are sports that are protected from any laws that may come in to change gambling sponsorship and TV advertising because those sports are so heavily reliant upon that revenue to survive. Um, Whereas other sports we've discussed with gambling firms and betting firms being sponsors and you know uh, TV ads and sponsorship and such. So, but I am surprised that New York State has the horse racing Hall of Fame. Um, Very surprising. On saying that, what would be more interesting is what percentage of on a given sport today. So let's say you've got a given sports program on the TV with all the TV rights and media rights and then the internet and things like that. How many Americans actually watch horse racing on a regular, frequent basis who are regular fans of that sport? Considering its connections with organised crime in the past and illegal gambling and other issues, I would be very interested how many Americans are interested in horse racing. I would be very, very interested on the numbers of Americans who regularly watch the sport, go to horse racing, are invested within the sport. Those numbers would be very, very interesting. Um, that's just something that interests me is what would the viewership figures and the attendance figures at horse racing venues. What are the numbers like? Because we are seeing over here in the UK some race courses really struggling in recent years, and this is before COVID, and going out of business. Attendances aren't great, um, and obviously with animal welfare groups, and I think there's a culture shift, and it's a generational thing. Um, I don't think there's the problem. If you've only got one or two high profile events in a professional sport, the money isn't necessarily going to be there. So it just would interest me what American sports fans what they feel about the sport, how many of them casually watch, are hardcore fans, you know. Uh, oh, that's interesting. Busy one now, but one question with the NHL: do you think the league will from now on push all teams to build their arenas like Seattle's the next time each of them need a new one? We know Arizona are in discussions with the city of Tempe about building a new arena, and while that's happening, leasing the arena in Tempe from next season. Obviously, we've seen what happened with the Islanders building their new arena at Belmont and the issues with Barclays. Most of the teams don't own the arenas they play in. Some do, some don't. Some they have leases with the city. Others, it's they do own the arenas they play in, or they share ownership or share usage with an NBA team. No, he is not the real Sean Avery. He wishes he was. He's far less controversial than the real Sean Avery. Uh, yes, Sean Avery, that guy who apparently played hockey for a while whilst annoying everyone in the league and further afield. Um, I don't know. Obviously, with what we've seen with the Islanders and the Coyotes having arena issues in recent years, the Seattle expansion Key Bank Arena being completely rebuilt and remodelled. Um, Obviously, Edmonton, the Oilers having a new arena built in recent years. That's an interesting one. It's an interesting sports question in general when it comes to professional sports. Should teams own their stadiums or lease their stadiums? Uh, it's a very interesting one. We've seen several English football teams have problems with, and rugby teams have problems with stadium issues where they don't own the stadium they're playing in. They lease their stadiums, where traditionally they used to own them, but for whatever reason they made short-term financial gain by selling it and then leasing it back to themselves. West Ham, for example, don't own their stadium; they're leasing the London City Stadium. Um, Coventry City have had a long period of instability with their home ground at the Ricoh Arena. They were at one point were ground sharing with Northampton Town. So on a European, as in talking domestically with sports leagues in my country, this is an issue. The hockey team I support are rink sharing with another team. Their home arena's gone. The owners pulled the plug and refused to invest in refurbing the the arena. They claimed it was too expensive, and actually it wasn't. They did it deliberately, and there's ongoing challenges into how certain business practices are done. Um, so there's a big debate about should teams own their arenas and stadiums or lease them. Um, we'll see what happens. A lot of the teams in the NHL do not own their arenas they play in. I think very few of them. So in regards to that, it's an interesting topic, very interesting topic. I think that's a more wider sports topic as well. Only one NRL team in Australia owns their stadium, and that's the Cronulla Sharks. The other 15 do not own their stadiums. Um, and they lease from local councils and private firms. They have to pay money. Um, yeah, only one out of 16 teams in the NRL owns their stadium. The AFL, not a single team, because the AFL has a different way of going about things. I don't think a single team in the AFL owns the stadiums they play their regular season games in. Pre-season's different because they have their old stadiums which are now used as training facilities. Rugby union, a handful of not all rugby union teams own their stadiums. A lot of them are again either ground shared or owned by someone else. So yeah, that's a very interesting question. It's to do, I think, well, running costs is one thing, um, but there's the situation with the Barclays Arena and the Nassau Coliseum being old and building a new arena for the Islanders. The Arizona situation with the Gila River Arena being a political issue um, and costing the city of Glendale a lot of money. Um, a lot of money. Uh, it, yeah, the long term leasing. It's an interesting debate that's been had for many many years in regards to a lot of sports. I don't know what the NFL, Major League Baseball, are like with their arena and stadium situations. NBA, very similar to the NHL. A lot of them are shared leases. Um, so, it, but it's an interesting question. Very interesting question. Bearing in mind the NHL, Gary Bettman, maybe commissioner, he's the mouthpiece of the owners. So as long as the owners are making money on their investment, I whether they start putting rules in place, I don't know. Um, it's this is the problem with the franchise model. If it's not working in one location, we can just simply move it. That's the threat that's been had. But the NHL are very clear; they want to keep the Coyotes in Arizona. There is a solution in Arizona. Proposals have been put forward to the city of Tempe. Um, Again, they want to keep the Florida Panthers in Florida. The Panthers have got a great deal with Sunrise that's very beneficial to the team, even if they don't fill the arena. Um, they're not moving. The Hurricanes aren't moving. So the teams that some Canadian fans go, just move the team. They don't draw fans. It's like, well, how many Canadian teams have been really crap for a very long time. There's never any calls to move the Oilers. There's never any calls to move the Flames. Senators, I think a new arena will do the Senators just fine, where their location in Ottawa isn't great. But Melnick is, you know, thoughts on Hughes, Pedersen, and Kachuk holding out. Well, salary cap has got something to do with it. Kaprizov signed in the end. When players hold out, they generally don't stay much longer with the teams they hold out, and they get traded not long after. So with Nylander in Toronto, that's interesting that he hasn't been traded yet. At some point, the salary cap as it is basically flat, maybe going up $1 million a year, not what it was predicted to go up in years past. Um, yeah, I don't know. But this is the issue with the salary cap. You're going to have to make some tough decisions on playing roster. Um, so in that regard, I couldn't tell you what my views are. Contract disputes happen in all sports. Um, they happen. The fact that these are three very high profile young players who are, future, superstars. I honestly believe that they're good players now, and I think that given the right circumstances, they could be superstars. Um, it is very interesting, but we've seen it before with some big name players. Some superstar players have been down this road before. Um, not the Senators. Definitely, it's what's being put on the table. Now, the Senators have a reputation of being a team that tries to do business on the cheap. Eric Carlson, that situation not that long ago. Um, and Eugene Melnick is known to be, yeah, um, tight with his wallet in giving funds for the players to be paid, even if they're well within the salary cap. Um, uh, well, we don't know the full ins and outs of the discussions. They probably have signed. There's going to be probably announced before the start of regular season. The longer they hold out, there is a cut-off point where if they aren't signed by a certain point, they cannot play. So there is clearly urgency from both sides to get deals done. Players want to go to the Olympics now. These players are eligible to play for their countries at the Olympics. Um, so if they're not playing, they're not getting game time. Fitness and match readiness becomes an issue. Then there is a cut-off point. I forget when the cut-off point is when they have to sign by. Um, and yeah, I believe they're all restricted free agents as well. So there's a limit on where they can actually go with other teams picking them up. So there is definitely a time constraint for both parties. But we don't know the full reasons um, why those discussions are being had. Obviously, their agents are trying to get them the best deal possible. The players obviously want to have long term commitments where they're going to be, in a city for a while. They have families, they have homes. They want to establish some stability, which is important. Um, and I do believe, yeah, the salary cap is having an impact. Maybe not on the Senators, but it is having an impact league wide. There are still 10 teams over the salary cap, so there's still waiver wire news. There's still players being put on long term injured reserve and injured reserve to get around cap constraints. There's going to be some trades made. Um, Players are being picked up on the waiver wire. Players are announcing their retirement, even though they're still eligible to play with their contracts. So this is. I'm just going to turn the light off because I don't need that anymore because the sunlight's out. So yeah, this is. I do believe the salary cap has something to do with it. And GMs are wary of signing these long-term contracts with the salary cap as it is because they've got to sign other players next year, the year after. There's going to be trades, so they could sign. Kachuk could sign for 4 or 5 years at a fair cap hit. And while that looks like a good deal now, with the salary cap not going up with that much, with other players due to be paid, and with roster moves and trying to plan ahead, it does complicate things. Uh, the Senators, again, they have a reputation of being um, very tight with the money, and I don't know. They are an outside chance to be a wild card for the playoffs, but that could be a false dawn. If they can't get Kachuk signed, and he is a key player for them, he's a leader. He's going to be a superstar, no doubt. He's got more offensive upside than his brother, in Calgary. Um, and some are saying he's actually both of them are more likely to be better than their father, Keith. Jesus. Um, again, I couldn't comment on the discussions. Obviously, they're ongoing. But Pierre Dorian's been under a lot of pressure for several years now as the Senators GM. A lot of pressure from the media, the fan base. Um, ownership is not the most popular, and I can understand why. Um, ownership is heavily scrutinised, not the most popular with the fans. The issues regarding spending in Ottawa, even if it wasn't a salary cap constrained league, Ottawa would still be spending less than other teams. Um, why players hold out their kid? There's a variety of reasons. Obviously, a player wants a certain length contract. The team want a different length contract. Signing on bonuses, you name it. There could be a whole host of reasons why the player's holding out and the GM are holding out, and at loggerheads. Um, we've seen this happen before, where players have held out on contracts. But I think Kachuk is a restricted free agent, so there's the arbitrator could. I don't know if he's got arbitration rights. So, but the time is ticking, so a deal needs to be done soon. Otherwise, yeah, the pressure goes back on Dorian, back on Eugene Melnick. Um, where in the last couple of seasons that pressure's not been there because not much has been expected. But some of the trades that Dorian has made haven't been great. At the time, um, large amount of roster turnover. Obviously, there's Ubergate not that long ago, a few years back. I think only one player is left out of Ubergate, so there has been a high player turnover. Maybe he wants a shorter deal contract, or because other teams can offer him 7 years. That's the rule, I think, on an RFA. If you're an RFA, you got offered 8 by the team you were with, 7 by other teams in the league, but no one's offer sheeted. So I don't know. That's what's been reported. We'll have to see what happens. Maybe he wants 8 years at 8.5, or a slightly bigger signing on bonus. We just don't know the ins and outs, but there needs to be a necessity to sign him. But again, when it comes to UFAs and RFAs and arbitration rights, yeah, free agency. I mean, yeah, the season hasn't started yet, but training camps have. The first pre-season games are being played. That means there is a necessity to get this deal done before the regular season starts. But there is a cut-off point. I believe it's the first week of December. If a player isn't signed by then he sits out. So he could sit out for another 3 months before signing. Um, Nylander did it. Bill Guerin's done it several times as a player. Now he's a GM, and he got the Kaprizov deal done. Um, but yeah, player contracts. I mean, we can go, oh, they're well paid. It's a privileged position to be what they're in. But you have to remember their careers can be notoriously short. Um, your Patrick Marlowe's and Joe Thorntons who play into their 40s don't come along very often. Most players are done by their early mid 30s. So yeah, their careers are notoriously short at the top level. They need to earn as much money as possible so they are protected for when they retire. Um, Not all players go into coaching and in the media and then into GM roles and front office roles. Most players don't. Um, so you have to understand why they haggle over money. It's not a good look, but at the same time, I understand to a certain extent why. Yeah, they haggle over contracts because their careers are short and they want to get the best deal possible for them. Um, obviously, we will figure the fully. Well, obviously, in time, the full ins and outs will come about. I believe his father, Keith Kachuk, also was a notoriously difficult negotiator when it came to contracts as well. Um, so we'll see what plays out. But yeah, it is in both sides' interest to get the deal done before the cut-off point. Um, they did. Kaprizov and Minnesota managed to work out a deal not that long ago. That's been rumbling on all summer. Um, but there are still other unsigned players out there. So, and with other teams, I do believe the salary cap is a head scratcher because they can sign them for this season, and they've got more UFAs and RFAs to sign next season. And of course, you've got player trades and waiver wires and LTIR because of the salary cap situation that the league finds itself in. Um, it is what it is, and yeah, obviously Keith, I believe, is part of their representative team as well. So he'll be advising his his boys what to do. Um, but we'll see what happens. We'll see how long Brady Kachuk remains senator. He may move on, and if he moves on, that's another high profile player that's left the Ottawa Senators organisation to go elsewhere. However, he plays elsewhere. Um, that means more pressure is heaped on Pierre Dorian, and more pressure is heaped upon Eugene Melnick. Uh, Pierre Dorian is a GM who, yeah, the pressure's been let off him a little bit, but he's been under pressure and under heavy scrutiny for a long time. The team have underperformed for a very long time, and the owner is, well, he's a maverick. Really, is the best way to describe Eugene Melnick. He's not well liked by the fan base. Um, so yeah, there's definitely wider implications. We'll see what plays out. Um, this is what I find really interesting when it comes to professional sports and the sports contract side of things. You know, free agency as it's known, and when you've got a league operating under a salary cap, um, I see what I mean. That too, guy. You see what I mean? Best player I've seen play. I've seen him score some cracking goals. I've had the privilege of actually seeing him play in the flesh. Told you to check him out. They don't make him like him anymore. Um, and yeah, he didn't always play at the biggest club, but I tell you now, if he was playing at a Real Madrid or a Barcelona or uh, a bigger European club, he would definitely be on the same conversation as like a Luis Figo, one of his contemporaries. Um, but I did say, yeah, I did tell you to check out Two Guy. Um, I bet you're glad now, aren't you? But again, like for some fans who are new to certain sports, we're told to check out this player's highlights. You have to watch the entire game they're playing. You can't just go, "Oh, this is him doing good stuff," because these players will also have their downsides, defensive frailties. They will make mistakes. They will get suspended. There will be pros and cons to their game. Um, and Two Guys definitely towards the end lost that yard of pace and became less effective. Still gave 110%. Still was an exceptional trainer, an exceptional team player. But as I say, if you're watching like rugby league, a lot of people in rugby league circles talk about Jared Hayne. Now he's in prison now for being a naughty boy. But his 2009 season, his highlights reel in that season is second to none. He was the best player in the league. But and his 2014 season as well, again, best player in the league. But what those highlight reels don't show was he was defensively, he had his moments, and his other seasons he was an average player who didn't do much. He had two good seasons in his entire career. He's now in prison for sex offences, so he's the R. Kelly of rugby league, in my opinion. Yeah, I dropped an R. Kelly bomb in there. the so what I'm saying to when I've had in the past American viewers asking about rugby and European football and both kinds of rugby, and I've put pointing them in the direction of certain highlights reels on YouTube, for example. It's the easiest way to introduce new fans to a sport, and then you give them like the league's full details, the number of teams. You tell them to watch a game in full. Um, doesn't matter if it's the men's or women's game; it's irrelevant. Watch the game in full. Um, and to an American, I would say watch rugby league to understand the basic concept of the sport. It's what I think is a good way to learn. Union is for those who've got a little bit more patience, and uh, it's more complex. So you've got to have patience to want to learn the game. If you are a bit more impatient and just want to see action, rugby league's just, I think, a better all round product to watch. It's more viewable. Rugby union, I would say, yeah, watch an international Six Nations or Rugby Championship international. I think they're better quality. The club game isn't great. Not gonna lie. I think rugby union at club level, uh, it can be a really unwatchable ball fest. To be fair, some internationals can be an unwatchable ball fest as well. But on the side of rugby league at club level, it's exceptionally enjoyable. It does have weaknesses at the international level, and obviously not having the World Cup this autumn, I think, has harmed the growth of the sport. But we get to look forward to that next autumn or fall, as you would call it, next October. So we've got to wait another 12 months. But I was hopeful that the World Cup would take place this autumn. Australia and New Zealand have had other ideas in regards to that taking place, which is frustrating, but is understandable considering what was happening in Australia and concerns that were being raised. Rightly so, it could have been dealt with a lot better. They could have had better communication and a better way of allaying the concerns. The organisers were definitely disappointed. The players were disappointed as well. Uh, but now what we've seen with the players misbehaving, I'm kind of glad it hasn't taken place because some of those players would have played at this World Cup and they have brought the game into disrepute. Um, and yeah, I mean, with all the off-field dramas that's been happening in the NRL in the last few days, uh, maybe a World Cup would be a good distraction to have. But obviously, you know, we haven't got a World Cup, which is a shame. But do you have any memory? Yep, I remember. Invictus isn't a great film. It's not the best film. I'm not gonna lie, but I do remember the '95 World Cup because of the time zone I live in. South Africa's on a similar time zone to Europe, so it was prime time viewing. Um, I was very ill at the time, so I wasn't. I was very very unwell at the time, so I had a lot of time to watch it because I wasn't well as a kid. Um, and it was the first World Cup in the professional era. So, because rugby union was completely amateur until 1995, this was the year that it went professional. Uh, I do remember Nelson Mandela handing over the trophy. I do remember the All Blacks record-breaking victory over Japan. I think it was 110 nil. I think it was record-breaking win, which was then broken in 2003. Um, I remember Eust van der Westhuizen playing the World Cup final with two broken ribs. Jonah Lomu running over, I think was it Rory Underwood, running him over catastrophically. Uh, I met Jonah Lomu as well a couple of times. Very humble. I met the All Blacks in '97 when I was at school, but that's another story altogether. Um, because they were using our school as a training base for the autumn internationals that they were playing uh, at the time. Yeah, the night Invictus isn't a great film. In all honesty, if you're a proper sports fan and a proper film buff, you'll know Invictus isn't the best film. But I do remember that World Cup. Uh, I also remember the '99 World Cup because it was hosted in Wales, which is obviously not that far from where I live. I mean, down the highway, as you would call it, the motorway. Um, uh, and I do remember that. Watching a fair few games of that whilst I was at school. 2003, I remember that as well. I've watched every World Cup since 1995 in rugby union, and rugby league. I've watched every World Cup since 2008. So yeah, I'm really passionate about both forms of rugby. I always have been, and you know, yeah, the '95 World Cup is important for a whole variety of reasons. It's the first one in the professional era. It was, the first major sporting event the South Africans were allowed back into after 20 or 30 years being in the sports wilderness due to apartheid. So they were basically banned from international competition. So for the South Africans, that was a really big moment domestically as well as internationally, with Nelson Mandela with the trophy. And it also then heralded the bringing in the Super Rugby era. So yeah, the '95 World Cup is one of those major milestones in sports history. It's one of the most important moments in sports history. Cannot be overstated. Nothing can overstate how important that moment is both for South Africa and global sport. Um, Very important moment, iconic moment. Um, Sadly, not all the players who played at that World Cup are still alive on both sides, South Africa and in the final. Not all of the players are still alive. Uh, Chester Williams has passed away. Joos van der Westhuizen has passed away. There was another South African player who's passed away. Jonah Lomu's passed away. I think there was another player. I think four or five. Uh, um, I think four or five players who played in that World Cup final are sadly no longer with us, who died in recent years. So, um, but very poignant. Very poignant moment. Uh, yeah, it's one of the most important sporting and cultural moments in our lifetimes. Absolutely, I think far more important than you know um, the the last match between East and West Germany in 1990 uh, in football. I think you know the Euro '92 with the Yugoslavs being kicked out and the Soviet Union actually still represented by the Commonwealth of Independent States and Denmark winning in '92. Um, yeah, there's I think sporting cultural moments, that has got to be the biggest sporting cultural moment. You could argue the Summit Series between the North American NHL teams and the Soviet Union in the '70s, the Miracle on Ice in 1980. You could argue for American sporting, moment. Um, but no, for me, I think in my lifetime, the biggest cultural and sporting moment has got to be the '95 Rugby World Cup by a long way. Does Nothing else comes close. Nothing comes close um, at all. Um, I've seen a lot of sporting events. I follow a lot of sports events. Um, People go to me, "Oh, Euro '96." Not even close. Um, that World Cup final and that World Cup in general is important for so many reasons. So many reasons. Um, what rugby union has changed since then? Yeah, since I would say 2003, 2004, the game has gone down a messy route. I think rugby played between 1995 and 2003 was, I think, the best rugby union we're ever going to see. The game since then hasn't gone the way it should have. The players have got bigger. It's now just turned into a pure arm wrestle of a sport now. I know the World Cup did have that impact. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I mean, for me, I mean, I've always had friends from you know a multitude of ethnic backgrounds. So for me, growing up, um, I obviously didn't know what apartheid was until one of my school teachers was from Zimbabwe, and she was white, so white minority, and it was after around the '99 World Cup that I really understood the 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 issues of apartheid. So 4 years later, through one of my teachers, I finally understood the issues at play in what was South Africa's Rhodesia, German Southwest Africa, so Southern Africa, where what we have now with Zimbabwe, South Africa, Namibia, Zambia, Botswana. Obviously, at times there was some rather not so nice things going on with British and German rule down there. Um, uh, before World War One, during World War One, World War Two, up to the '90s, there was some not very nice things happening um, in regards to human rights and you segregation, civil rights, and all sorts. So very similar to the US in the Deep South and in the civil rights movement. Yeah, the US has never been banned from international sport, but we can ban South Africa for doing the same thing. I don't understand that. You know, um, wow, 97. So I'm now old. I'm old. Yeah, no. So obviously the '95 World Cup is important. The the 2010 Football World Cup in South Africa is important because it's the first first football World Cup on the African continent. Although we've had cricket and rugby union there, so in that regard, it's not a first, but it's a first for a sport. Um, yeah, but I would say the moment with Nelson Mandela and Francois Pienaar being the South African captain with the trophy, definitely an iconic moment. The I could say, yeah, the Miracle on Ice in 1980, but that's before my time. Um, but yeah, in my opinion, um, there are some other iconic sports moments. Depends on your point of view, but if you understand the history behind it and the politics behind it, then I think it is still a iconic moment. That image of Mandela and Francois Pienaar with the trophy is iconic. It's the most iconic. Yeah, obviously other sporting achievements and sporting moments are going to happen. I do remember Super Saturday, which is a term over here in the UK with the London Olympics, where we won like a shed load of medals but in the space of about an hour, we won like 9 golds or something. Um, the the Red Sox, I think was it 2012, the Red Sox broke the 86-year curse, something like that. 2012, am I wrong? It was about a decade ago. Um, so yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I think there's going to be some other very iconic sporting and social moments um, and cultural moments that are linked to sport that will come. But yeah, I think the one that tops the list is definitely 95. I mean, I should really do a video on my top. I think the most important sporting moments in my lifetime. Um, the Japan and Korea Football World Cup in 2002. I think that's iconic as well. Um, Okay, so they've won it a fair few times in recent years. I knew they won one about a decade ago. I didn't realise they won it 4 times in 16 years. Um, so they win one every 4 years, basically. Not bad going. But yeah, no, uh, again, it depends on what your viewpoint is. I mean, um, I don't know what the impact of the '95 Rugby World Cup was in the US, but um, in Europe and the Southern Hemisphere, that was a um, massive moment. Um, and I've got a lot of South African friends, so I think, and my family got a lot of South African friends. So for us, it's definitely sits more with us than with others. But I don't know what the impact. You'll have to ask your parents and your grandparents what the impact of Nelson Mandela and do they remember the '95 Rugby World Cup. I bet you their answer will be Rugby World Cup. Um, I, you know, it, I think if that moment was to happen now, I think the impact would be even bigger. Uh, if I'm being honest, if there was a Nelson Mandela Francois Pienaar moment now, I think it would be bigger. But um, that was then. There've been some other pretty um, big sporting moments. We have Super Saturday in the UK from 2012 at the Olympics. Yeah, in the space of literally less than an hour, we're winning gold medals all over the place, and it just exploded. Um, David Ortiz, yeah. I still think with Major League Baseball, they're still feeling the effects of the steroid era. Those effects are still being massively felt today, all those years later, because more revelations keep coming out. So, in that regard, Major League Baseball is still feeling the effects of what happened. It does, but the way my apartment, my flat, what you would call it an apartment, is laid out. There's not a lot of space to get the whiteboard out and get all my coloured pens out and really turn into Professor Professor Boffin, really. Um, but yeah, I have been asked what I, I would say. Yeah, I'll give it away. But the number one, it's very difficult to rank my top five, top ten. It is really really difficult because um, to me, I could argue like in my lifetime, the same year Nelson Mandela hands over the trophy to Francois Pienaar is the same year my football club, Blackburn, won the Premier League. 5 months before. Um, so '95 was a year of two major sporting moments for me. Um, and they'll be my top two. What order I put them in, I think, yeah, South Africa winning the Rugby World Cup still tops anything that any of my teams have done. Um, I would say iconic moment for me would be seeing my first Winnipeg whiteout in 2015 after '96. That first one back, I think that is an iconic moment as well. Just watching footage of that online gives me the shivers. Um, so yeah, when fans are in attendance when we're in playoffs, that the 2018 ones give me the most shivers. Um, Absolutely sends shivers up my spine. Um, so yeah, that's iconic moments because they come around quite regularly these days. But all depends on how many fans are allowed in the arenas this year and how we do. But if we make playoffs again, I'm very much looking forward to a Winnipeg Whiteout. Just sends shivers down my spine. And I don't even live in Canada. I've never been to Canada, but definitely that's a spine tingling moment. Um, I yeah, there's a few others up there. I think the 2019 Cricket World Cup final, uh, for most entertaining final, I think that went down to literally the final ball. England New Zealand for the 2005 Ashes. Um, Yeah, there's a few moments in my lifetime of sporting moments, but how that you know transpires to a North American audience, for example. I mean, 2 years ago, the Canberra Raiders get back to their first grand final in the NRL since 1994, and their first in the NRL era. As a Canberra fan, I was exceptionally proud of the team, as I was in 2016, where they made the preliminary finals. So this year was a bit of a disappointing season. Injuries and suspensions had their impact, but um, you know, yeah, exceptionally enjoyable watching them do well. The Cronulla Sharks winning their first premiership in 2016 as well. Um, I remember watching that game. That was a very, very good game. So yeah, I mean, obviously, my know um, impactful sports moments will to a North American audience not necessarily have the same impact. If you know what I mean, I think you would have to understand the sports that I'm talking about, the leagues I'm talking about, um, the reasons why they're impactful, the social aspect behind some of them, um, the importance to the communities that you know uh, they impacted. Um, but y- yeah, there's definitely now. Yes, me and my neighbour Adam have been discussing this all summer. The situation at Spurs. It's not Nuno's fault. Going to put that out there. He wasn't their first choice manager. I think he was their ninth or 10th choice by the time he was appointed. The, the search for a manager was absolutely farcical. The sacking of Mourinho, the way that was dealt with, literally days before a cup final, and he was the only manager to beat Guardiola up to that point in a cup final. Obviously, Chelsea and Tuchel have now proven that two guys have now beaten Guardiola in a cup final. Um, you know, ridiculous. Um, the yeah, Harry Kane saying he wants to leave, doesn't want to stay. He then comes out saying, "I'm going to stay this summer," which means he's probably going in January. They win the first couple of games, fine, thumbs up. Um, International break comes along, they've gone. Their form has deserted them. Guess what? The season's still early, but this is a club that signed up to this European Super League. This is a club that hasn't won a trophy in over a decade. The only reason why it's one of the big six is, well, apparently financial, but they've spent over £1 billion on a stadium and yeah, haven't won any trophies to fill their trophy cabinet. Um, the, the Gareth Bale, all the players that were signed with the Gareth Bale money have all now left. None of those players are still there, and Gareth Bale's gone again after his average loan spell. Uh, they lost the worst Champions League final in history, which I fell asleep watching. Yeah. Um, Basically, yeah, they failed to win the league and all the various cups they go for. Um, Too many egos in the dressing room, lack of direction. Um, the manager who's there wasn't the first choice, he wasn't the second choice, wasn't the third choice, wasn't the fourth choice. They went through a list of available managers and for various reasons didn't get a deal done. For whatever reason, they end up with Nuno, a guy who said when he left Wolves, "I need a break from football. I need to spend time with my family and assess whether I want to continue coaching." Nuno, we need you to coach. All right. Um, yeah, I can see Tottenham having a very disappointing season. at the same time, the season's very early, and I think every team have lost games this season. And Brighton, nearly went top of the Premier League, and uh, that would have been bananas. Arsenal had a very poor start to the season. Their form's picked up, so and Arteta. There, people are saying get rid of Arteta. Well, it's not his fault. The team are where they are. Really, it's been a long-term decline at Arsenal, much like Tottenham has. It's been a long-term not being good enough. Um, Tottenham fans giving it all that, they've won nothing. Um, the way they the Harry Kane negotiations where he wants to leave, it's yeah, it's been shambolic. And however you look at it, uh, it's not been great. Bearing in mind, this is a club that a year and a half ago were furloughing non-playing staff, and then the public reaction was so bad they very quickly stopped doing it. Um, they've mismanaged the squad. There's clearly an issue with the back room there. There's clearly an issue with the squad in general, the morale. Do Tottenham have a direction? Um, the fact they sack Pochettino but then try and rehire him, like the problems are, oh yeah, desperation, desperation. Um, and when your club captain's refusing to turn up to training on time, all he's got to say is, "I'm fatigued. Talks. I need some time off." Um, what was reported, he refused to turn up to training. He didn't report to pre-season training on time. If you're in your workplace and you don't turn up and you go AWOL, you're going to get suspended or sacked, right? So, like, I don't know where you go from this point on. Like, if you were ill or you were suffering from fatigue or whatever it may be, you just have to have a conversation with. And from the looks of it, he was saying he was tired and fatigued. He's partying hard on holiday with his missus. Not a good look. But at the end of the day, like yeah, Spurs, yeah, they've come up short in their pursuit of silverware. Uh, I think it is a very divided squad. Um, they still haven't got naming rights for their stadium. Not necessarily a bad thing. Um, I don't like the Americanisation of sport where it's not Old Trafford or it's the Etihad or it's the Emirates. It's like, hang on a second, just let's stop with these naming rights of stadiums where the historical names get dropped for a foreign corporation, please. Um, I cannot believe the Gold Coast Titans let Jamal Fogarty go. I mean, I'm glad the Raiders have snapped him up. We do need a halfback. Um, but I think that the Titans are making a mistake there. I really do. I know Sullivan's a good young player, but Ash Taylor's on the way out as well. So what's their halves combination going to be like? Is it going to be Tyrone Peachey in there with Sullivan? That could be an interesting combination. Um, that could be a very interesting combination. Oh look, I you get these games where you have those one-off defeats where you have a bad game, but I just don't. I just don't think there's it's a happy dressing room. I don't think it's as all rosy um, as they are letting on. Quite frankly, I think there's more at play than they're willing. You know, basically, I don't think the Spurs is a happy, positive environment, and I don't think it's all on Nuno. I don't think it's Nuno Espirito Santo's fault. Um, he's been thrown in uh, to the position because they couldn't get their first choice. I think he was ninth or 10th on their list of managers. Um, and I followed it in depth. I mean, I did no videos on it because it's all pure speculation. I'm just sorting out some notes on my whiteboard. Let's get rid of all that crap. So yeah, in oh bloody hell. So in regards to the Spurs situation, I feel sorry for Nuno because he's been thrown into basically a dysfunctional mess. Um, oh look, what I find with European football is the managerial turnaround, as we call it. Your average manager now is in charge for between 9 and 18 months. Um, Clubs that regularly change their managers, Chelsea, I would say, notwithstanding, because Chelsea managed to have a new manager every 9 to 18 months and still win trophies, um, doesn't breed long term success and long term stability. Um, that's my opinion when it comes to constantly um, sack the manager. You don't get long term stability and therefore long term success with the league position where you're consistently a solid side and you're doing reasonably well, trophies, qualification for the European competitions, making finals. You're constantly sacking the manager. Because we have a promotion relegation system, you end up getting relegated or not being as successful. And I think Tottenham are going to find very, very quickly that if Nuno doesn't stick around for whatever reason, they're going to go in a spiral. And there's no other way to describe it. The only club that I can see that regularly has a manager turnover is Chelsea. And how long can that model last? I would say not very long. But they average a new manager every 2 seasons at Chelsea. Um, in regards to Tottenham, they risk spiraling and then not fulfilling their potential. But they've been not fulfilling their potential for years, years and years and years. They haven't won the league for I think 1961. They haven't won a trophy since I think it was 2008, and they've fallen short in big games, big pressure situations. They have choked it, and until they can make and win a cup final, it's all well and good making cup finals, um, Champions League and League Cups and all that. Um, it's all well and good making the cup final, but if you can't win it and you crumple from the first kickoff till the final whistle, then you don't deserve to win anything. Um, and that lies with the playing group because 3 different managers now have had a crack, um, and unfortunately, there's they're not getting that reward, and you have to then question the playing group because if different coaches are having the same problem with the same core, then it's not on the coach. Then it's on the playing group, and it's then on the culture within that dressing room. It's then it is on the the it has to be on the players because all the coaches have had a slightly different philosophy of how to play the game, but it's the same core of players and it's the same failures. Um, in relation to American football in England, Wembley, Twickenham, being played there. NFL games have been played there. Spurs. Um, but yeah, there's not as many facilities as there should be. No, they've won the FA Cup a few times since 1961. They've won the League Cup in my lifetime. They've won the FA Cup in my lifetime, but 2 trophies in in my lifetime. It's not great. I think they won the League Cup a few times. They've made a couple. They've made several League Cup finals, but 2 trophies. I mean, um, down and bounced around the hierarchy. They've just not got over the line, and they've had some brilliant players. Jurgen Klinsmann has played with them. Ozzy Ardiles, World Cup winners, have played for Tottenham. Um, you know, they Jimmy Greaves, possibly the best England striker for goals per game ratio ever. Obviously passed away the other day. World Cup winner, Ozzy Ardiles, Ricky Villa, World Cup winners with Argentina in '78. Jurgen Klinsmann had 2 spells at the club. Um, they've had a history of having some really really brilliant players, internationals, top quality players throughout the generations, throughout the eras. Um, the problem is there's obviously, yeah. I don't know how else to really describe their underachievement. Um, but yeah, they've underachieved for a very very long time, and you could argue several clubs have, and the way the money game works now. I was watching a Four Corners, which is an Australian program about money in football, and I was focusing on the City Group, the Man City owners, because they own teams all over the world, and where the money comes from, and it's a whole variety of things to do with the game behind the scenes. And yeah, I mean Tottenham, yeah, they've got a stadium for NFL football. Um, they've signed an agreement with the NFL. Can't get any title sponsors for their stadium. Their stadium was over budget. It was late. It affected their ability to sign new players. I think they went 18 months without signing a new player to the club. Um, yes, I will. I will agree. You know, a lot of their players have come through their system. It's great, but you know, uh, yeah, Spurs, a legacy of underachievement, and then you have to ask the question about why they're not achieving what they could have achieved in the last 5 6 years. They've had opportunities to win the league in cups, and they've fallen short in big pressure games, and um, it's just not good enough. I think they peaked in 2018. I think that FA Cup semi-final against Man United, where they blew it from a winning position, um, that was the moment that, um, I think, yeah, they 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 had to assess their culture, their squad depth, their squad makeup, the balance of the team, the style of football they were playing, and then yeah, um, Tottenham's quite a big field, but I think one of the most well, an NFL team in London, I think is highly unlikely at this point, regardless of how many fans you would draw. You know, the London series works because every team, I think, all but two NFL teams have now played in the London series since inception, in 2007. Um, so yeah, you get all the fan bases out, but when you've got 8 games at home a season before playoffs, and even then, only a handful of teams make the playoffs. Your team isn't. They were saying, "Well, we'll move Jacksonville there." Well, that team sucks. So 8 games of watching them lose would not be great. Um, my least favourite football team. I think as I've slowly there's fallen out of love with the sport. I mean, Blackburn Burnley is the rivalry, and hate Burnley. Um, but I think, yeah, um, I don't really have one anymore. There are teams I like to see do well and teams I like to see struggle and suffer. I'm rubbing my hands with glee with Barcelona and Real Madrid struggling in the Champions League this season and having problems off the field. It's a warm fuzzy feeling when the arrogance and the entitlement of those clubs is coming out to risk their financial difficulties. While I don't like to see any club in financial difficulty, it couldn't have happened to better clubs. The fact that the Crystal Palace Athletics and Aquatic Centre are in terrible state of disrepair is down to you know a whole host of issues, from local authorities to centralised funding to grassroots funding from government. And yeah, the debate about investing in sports facilities locally where I live, they're closing them down. Um, and there's question marks over the future of Basingstoke Ice Rink. The Bracknell Ice Rink's gone, mothballed. Isle of Wight, mothballed. Um, it took, I think, 4 or 5 years for Romford to get their new rink built, and that was through private means. You know, yeah, there's Streatham, that was finally under the council. Took a long time to, redevelop their facilities. Um, yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, yeah, sports facilities and investment. Where's this Olympic legacy then? Where's this World Cup legacy from the Rugby Union World Cup? Obviously, the Rugby League World Cup's been delayed by a year. You know, um, we were told all these things with all these the Commonwealth Games. Man City have got the stadium, great. It's money laundering by the Arab UAE, a government that regularly ranks low when it comes to human rights abuses. Um, but it's okay because I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not great. The public swimming pools in Reading have gone. I think it's on the Bath Road, the Bath pool, gone. Um, there's been concerns over the upkeep of the leisure centre where I live in Bracknell. In our local community, the ice rink's gone. Looks likely the ski slope's gone. Um, but this is what happens when you have public facilities in private hands. This is the privatisation of public sport. It's been going on for years. Uh, I have the debate about playing fields, and there are less and less of them. What else can you say? Um, you know, there's definitely the Commonwealth Games going to Birmingham. There's meant to be a massive injection and infusion of investment, but Birmingham as a city, I mean, God, the Bullring, oh, not a pleasant shopping centre, horrible building. I mean, my dad was still alive. He used to regularly criticise the Bullring because he used to live just outside Birmingham. And we used to go into Birmingham City Centre, and then we wished we wouldn't. There was one time we wanted to go bowling, and the three bowling alleys that we wanted to go to, two were shut because of drive-by shootings, and one was shut because of a stabbing. So that was a lovely day out. We just drove around the West Midlands for 3 hours, and then I went, "Can we just go home, please?" Not because I didn't enjoy spending 3 hours in a Citroen C3 Pluriel that had a leaking roof, but everywhere we went there was police tape, and they were turning people away because there'd been murders. Um, so social deprivation is another thing, and Crystal Palace is not a nice area of South London. White City is not a nice area. Not pretend it is. Um, you know, I've got friends who live all over London, and you know, some of the areas they live in, I have sympathy for them. They're very deprived areas. They're very dangerous areas. I've got family live in London. My cousin, who's mixed race, we've had to move him out of London to get him away from uh, gangs, basically, um, and trouble. And yeah, lack of sports facilities. I would say the Olympic legacy in the UK is a lot better than in other countries. Greece, Brazil. Um, we can argue on Sochi and all that. For use of facility. I mean, the Montreal Olympics, I think was 70. Was it 78? Um, the Olympic Park is now used as an F1 circuit. The Gilles Villeneuve circuit. But yeah, there was issues with workers going on strike, facilities. The costs were spiraling. Um, the Sydney Olympics, they're already revamping those stadiums. 20 years later, they're already rebuilding them. Brisbane's the next city that's been awarded the Olympics. And yeah, apparently loads of investment going into Brisbane in Australia. Um, I would I wouldn't say sport in Britain is fully elitist, but I would say that there is a funding issue with grassroots on all sports. All sports, even rugby union, which is seen as an elitist sport, and cricket, two of the elitist sports, grassroots cricket, grassroots rugby union, are in trouble. The facilities aren't great, and clubs are going out of business. Um, if we're talking about sport in South America. Football, not so much. Um, Argentinian sport is very similar to Spanish and other European sports clubs, where the club will have a football team, a polo team, tennis, rugby union. They do play cricket in Argentina. Uh, it will be a multi-sport club, and of course, the football teams are obviously the most famous. But horse polo, is the national sport in Argentina because Pampas and the gaucho culture. Um, but yeah, there is a hint of the upper middle classes in some sports in Argentina. Motorsport and football, I think, are less elitist, but yeah, polo, rugby union to a certain extent, the legal middle class, the legal professional middle class play it a lot, but that's a traditional thing. That's no slight on those who play the game. Same in Portugal when it comes to rugby union, it's played by the middle classes because that's historically who played the game in the amateur era. Now it's becoming more professional, more working class, blue collars, working people are picking up the game. Well, yeah, you're paying money to go to school, so yeah, they do have better facilities, and that has been the case from day one. Let's not dispute that. But it's also the grassroots outside of education where we need to look at sports funding. And when we're looking at sports facilities, where you live in Swindon, I now live outside of Bracknell, but I live in Wokingham. But yeah, sports facilities in Wokingham, they're redeveloping the public pool um, and the bowling alley. Massive redevelopment in the town centre, but long overdue. The cricket club's gone. That's become a housing estate. The nearest cricket club up the road is smaller facilities, nice facilities, but very hidden. Um, but yeah, like there is a significant lack of investment, be it from private owners of facilities or the state. And there has been, and this is long before the COVID pandemic, and I think this predates the financial crash 2008. There has been definitely an issue with an erosion of sports facilities at grassroots level for public use. Um, yeah, that's an ongoing debate over local authority and centralised government spending of sports facilities and public facilities for the public, basically outside of the education system. Um, but the Olympic legacy, there was a lot of money spent on that Olympics, and it actually, ironically, was not over budget. It was within budget. The London Olympics was within budget. And yes, a lot of the facilities are still being used. Eton Dorney, my friend lives right by Eton Dorney Rowing Lake. That is still a used facility, both by Eton College, the school, and the public, and the Brit UK Rowing. Still a used facility. It's still used for competition. Still used. It's a brilliant facility. I've seen it up close. It is actually a fantastic facility. They have refurbed for the Olympics. Very, very good. Um, the national velodromes, I think there's one in Manchester. There's, I believe, one still in London, still used. The stadium, obviously used by West Ham, um, was used in the Rugby Union World Cup as well. To use facility. The sailing, well, that was a temporary facility anyway. Um, but for the most part, the major sporting facilities are still used, and the old athletes' village is now used as social housing. It's been sold on to social and private housing, so there is a use for the old Olympic village in Stratford. It's part of the redevelopment of that area, which was a deprived area before the Olympics came. So, in regards to the Olympic legacy, far better than other host cities in the past and host nations in the past. Um, but the grassroots funding, yeah, absolutely. There's been a debate of how successful that Olympic legacy has been. Um, but it definitely a lot better than other host nations and host cities have been with the use of their facilities post Olympics. I think in the Winter Olympics, Lillehammer and Albertville, the last two Winter Olympics on the 2 year cycle in 92 and 94, those facilities are still being used to present day. The bobsleigh, the ski, all those facilities are still being used present day. So, Turin, the stadium, is still being used, and the facilities up in the uh, Piedmont Alps, still being used. The Cog Box still being used. So yes, a lot of the facilities at Lillehammer still being used to this day. Albertville, which was 92, which is the first Olympics I remember watching, still being used to this day. Turin, a lot of them are still being used to this day. Not so much Nagano in Japan. Not so much. If that Winter Olympics was held in Sapporo, no doubt the facilities were used a lot more because of the climate. Nagano, not so much. Less. Um, the talking about the Winter Olympics now. Vancouver, Mount Whistler is Mount Whistler. Most of those facilities are still being used in Vancouver. Sochi, not so much. Pyeongchang, not so much. Beijing, well, they're reusing the Olympic Stadium for their second Winter Olympics, so you could argue, yes, the Beijing Olympic legacy still being felt because they're using facilities on a second cycle. Admittedly, obviously, all those years later, 2008 to 2022, but the Beijing, yeah, they're still using the facilities, or some of them. But the Tokyo Olympics, we'll have to see what that legacy for those facilities is going to be when fans are allowed to return to arenas and stuff. I have no doubt with the Tokyo one that there will be a lot of use from the public in Japan. No doubt. The Seoul Olympics, some of the venues at the Seoul Olympics are still being used. So yeah. Other Olympic venues, they've completely demolished stadiums and rebuilt them. Sydney, they're doing a lot of redevelopment of the Olympic venues 20 years on. So when we're talking about Olympic legacy, Rio was a mess, Athens was a mess, Montreal was a mess. Commonwealth Games legacy as well. You could, yeah, major sporting events like that. You could argue sporting legacy when it comes to rugby union, rugby league, and football World Cups. A lot of those stadiums, the infrastructure was already there. The Qatar one will be the interesting one. How many of those stadiums are still being used 5, 10, 15 years later? If they've been abandoned, they're a folly. They're a folly. Come on. with the fact the country's a desert, unless they're going to use the stadiums for mass executions because of their human rights record, I don't know. Growing up in the UK, do you have a sport you wanted to play, or the sports you saw you wanted to play but didn't have access to? Hockey, I could have played hockey. It was the expense. Ice hockey, it was the expense, and I'm not very good at ice skating or skiing. I mean, I can ski, I can ice skate, but I'd rather watch my friends play than play myself. But I had access to ice skating facilities. The rink I used to skate at has just shut last year. The next nearest rink is in Slough, which is 20 miles away. Another one's Basingstoke. So I can get to other ice rinks and skate or watch games if I want to. It was the cost of junior hockey in this country. My mum was a single mum at the time. My parents were separated. My dad was still in the army, so he wasn't on the best. He was on decent money, but not the best money. My family didn't have a lot of money when I was growing up, so we couldn't afford to sacrifice that much to get me playing. I did play rugby for my local rugby club. I did play sport at school. As an adult, yeah, I played rugby at my local rugby club. I played five-a-side football, soccer in a five-a-side league with some friends. We all had to pay. We all had to chip in to pay for the registration and all that. I would say growing up, I think where I live in the area in the UK I live in, we do have access to a fair few sport facilities. But I wasn't born in the UK. I was born in Germany. On saying that, we did have more playing fields, so I could, have a kick about football with my friends or touch rugby or frisbee. There are less playing fields now than what there were when I was growing up. I went to some sports summer camps as a teenager, for a couple of years in a row, which were fun. I made some friends. I made friends for life out of them. So yeah, I went to. I wouldn't say no, rugby is not as cheap and accessible as you think. You've still got to pay for your kit. You've still got to pay for your membership. It's not equipment, training equipment. It's not as cheap as you think. Football is a more all sports in cost comparison to ice hockey or Field hockey is cheaper, and lacrosse, um, and cricket. Uh, I think I have been lucky to a point. Um, what position do I play in rugby? League or union? I I um I started out ironically, even though I'm not the biggest, when I was at youth level. I started out as second row because I was quite tall, so lock. Then I ended up on the wing and fullback. I played fly half, scrum half, inside centre, outside centre, both wings, full. I played every position in the back line. I've played flanker, number eight, second row, so I played most positions in the forward pack. When it comes to rugby league, I've been dummy half, um, halfback, 5'8", wing, fullback, left centre, right. I've played every position. Um, I I wouldn't. I've played every position in the back line you can think of in both codes. Primarily a winger and primarily wing fullback, but occasionally a scrum half. It was fun playing it when I did. I think I needed it at the time for the mental side of it. It gave me a lot of confidence in myself to get back into work, and I haven't looked back since I played. Um, the injuries I sustained, however, I'm still feeling the effects a decade later. Been over 10 years since I've had issues with my neck, my shoulder, my back, my ankle, my knee, both knees, my groin. Um, I've had issues with concussion. So while it was fun playing, the body just has given up um, cooperation. Yeah, and yeah, I've had some health issues since then. So that's on top of you know uh, my playing days. If I was a bit younger, would I continue playing? Yeah, looking back in hindsight, yeah, I would love to have continued playing and had fun doing it. But unfortunately, um, injuries started to pile up, and I then had some health issues following my playing days, where I had some bad chest infections and bronchitis and pneumonia, and I was a bit unwell. Is a nice way to describe how unwell I was in the months after I stopped playing. I was very, very ill. I had to go to hospital and have blood tests and medications and scans and X-rays, and so yeah, there's no way I could play it now. Um, I, while I would love to, I'm more just sit back and watch now, and you know um, enjoy it as a fan rather than playing. I've, I've done I've done me playing. I've had me bumps and bruises. It was fun doing it though. I will admit, it was definitely an eye opener. Um, and yeah, I've spent too long out of the game to be any good at coaching either. The rules have changed a lot since I played. There have been rule changes. The game is different now to when I was playing. So if I was to coach now, I'd have to completely relearn all the rules. There's the basics are the same, but the tackle area has changed. Scrummaging keeps changing every year. The ruck and maul, the rules regarding that keep changing. Um, so yeah, while I would while I would definitely love to coach, I think I'm better just being a fan. Uh, I think that moment has passed to be involved coaching and playing. Um, I was tempted to start playing again um, a few years back, but no, I think that ship has passed, um, which is unfortunate. But don't get me wrong, I did enjoy my playing days. Absolutely. I If I could go back and continue playing, I think yeah, Maybe I should have started playing when I was a bit younger. Um, or maybe I should have gone down the rugby club when I was like 17, 18, after taking a year or so out from playing when I finished school and got playing. Maybe I should have, some of my mates were playing for some of the youth teams at the time. Maybe I should have spoken to them about going down and playing for the rugby club. Maybe I should have done that. But that's all in hindsight. You know, when it comes to, as I said in a previous live stream, studies have been done where they um, see a marked drop off in participation after the age of, depending on um, whether you go into like an apprenticeship or you leave secondary education in the UK, is between 16 and 18. There is a marked drop off, especially in young women. Um, and so yeah, keep an eye on your daughter playing, because there is a significant drop off when she hits about 16 to 18. That's when they stop participating in playing. Now, my friend Dave, his daughters both play football at the local football club down the road, and they're very good actually. They are playing rather well, and their development is they're doing really well. They're developing really well as players. Um, they enjoy playing. Uh, he used to play Sunday league football. He also plays rec league hockey. So his family's very sporty, which is good. So uh, and um, and their mum encourages them to play as well. Unfortunately, they separated, but my mate's kids really enjoy their playing. Um, Another one of my friends, her eldest son played rugby for a little while, but he's now more interested in video gaming and being a teenager in that sense. So yeah, I've had some of my friends, their kids have been actively involved. Another one of my friends regularly takes her son to football at Aldershot Town when they can with her partner. And regularly on Facebook, you see them meeting the players and having a good time. A lot of my other friends follow Maidenhead United quite passionately, and used to have a Sunday league team, and they regularly go to games. So I see through social media some of my friends and their sporting achievements and their kids' sporting achievements, and yeah, there is studies being done that do say that the sports drop off after the age of 18 to 21 with men and 16 to 18 with women is there, and it is more sharply noticed in women than in men. And that is a long term trend that has been ongoing for many, 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 many years. And of course, men's professional sport, there's more of it. Um, and at semi pro level and amateur level, there's more sports teams and sports clubs uh, that cater to men's teams than women. Obviously, with the growth of women's football, women's rugby, women's cricket, they're starting to change that trend slowly, but there's still a lack of opportunity for women's professional and semi-professional athletes. Uh, right, she plays in a mixed team. I think your best bet is to look in your wider community outside of school for them to continue. I know there's a big drive now for women's teams in rugby union. You live in Swindon, so I know there's a couple of rugby clubs in the Swindon area. Um, yeah, I would suggest looking at if there are girls' teams at the local rugby clubs. Um, where I live, there is the women's team are very, very good at the women's rugby club. Sandhurst have Sandhurst ladies football and the youth teams. The ice hockey, the Queen Bees were the national champions when they were playing at Bracknell. I think they are still actively going. Basingstoke had a very good women's setup and youth setup. So there are sports clubs out there which have women's teams and mixed clubs as I'll call them. But it's all about finding them. And if she does stop, that is a massive, massive shame. But if there's women's girls football teams, yeah, keep her active. That's my uh, bit of advice. But yeah, government studies and independent studies have shown, not just here in the UK, but across Europe and across the developed world, um, so we're talking Western Europe, well, Europe in general, Australia, New Zealand, uh, South Africa, South America, North America. So what you call the OECD developed nations, that there is definitely a drop off for women's participation post education. And it's more pronounced in some countries over others. We know in the US the collegiate system is quite well established. Um, we know obviously in Australia and New Zealand, again, sports mad countries. Um, there are avenues for women's professional sport there that are well established. There is women's NRLW, Women's League, which is slowly going professional. Um, they've got a very strong program in both Australia and New Zealand for rugby league and rugby union for women. Um, women's basketball is quite well supported down under. So the opportunities regionally are there. However, the numbers are still when girls and women leave education at university or school, they tend to, in higher percentages, stop sport or give up. Um, yeah, I mean, this wasn't always the case. So there are some positive signs that um, are leading in the right direction. I've got some friends, uh, twins actually, they're sisters, who played in a women's football team, and they both of them no longer play, which is a shame. But I think there were some injuries um, with the owner and Claire. They're both Swansea fans for their sins, but they both played in a women's team for many years. And I don't think that women's team exists anymore. So again, it's down to grassroots and interest. Um, but yeah, this is all hypothetical conversations. Hopefully, obviously, your daughter continues to play sport through secondary education and continues after she leaves education as an amateur or semi-pro. We don't know what women's football or women's rugby holds going forward, but it's definitely growing. Um, it's meeting resistance from some, and there's funding issues there as well. Um, but I think there's definitely an argument for promoting not only women's sport but just grassroots sport in general. But there are funding issues for a lot of amateur and semi-pro clubs below the professional ranks in rugby union, rugby league, and football. When we're seeing professional clubs going part-time, there are some worrying signs, and so that's something we have to be aware of. You're 24 and you're still pitching at NCAA, so that's university, college level, I'm assuming. If I have a really good year, I hope to get signed by a major league team and play in the minors. I know baseball has a very, very good minor league system in comparison to the other major league sports in the US and Canada. Very, very good professional minor league structures across the US. Um, that's one thing baseball has going for it. Other than that, baseball does have some problems, and the fact that at 24, you're plugging away. We'll see if you can make the minors. If you do, you can have a um, half decent career. But um, I think minor league baseball. There is more teams in minor league baseball. But so Major League Baseball and baseball in general has a much more solid foundation for player base and professionalism than the other major leagues in North America. But baseball is a sport that is beset by problems, um, and you know um, for a whole host of reasons. Um, but it is interesting talking to people who have played various sports at various levels, and I can say, yeah, I can have that debate on sport because you don't know, you've never played. I have. I've gone through injuries. I've gone through training -10 in the snow and ice. Um, I've done the away days where uh, you know you travel for 2 hours, you get there, and it is literally playing on a grotty pitch in a howling gale in the middle of winter. I've done all that. Um, so yeah, in in that regard, yeah, I've done all the basic, grassroots level stuff. Um, but yeah, I think the debate over facilities and youth involvement and community involvement and sport being being a community unifier. You know North America's got a different sports culture um, with how you get to the professional levels and community level sport and league structures and governing bodies. It's different in North America to Europe, but the same principle applies. Absolutely. Um, but yeah, the way the sports are governed, the league structures, the pathways, the whole the systems in place is it's different and I, for some in the US it is an escape out of poverty. Absolutely, especially from those minority communities, all those communities where high unemployment, high crime rates. If you're good at sport at high school, you go to college, or you're good at sport at junior level, and you get scouted by a minor league team or an affiliate team that plays for the major leagues, then yeah, it is an escape from poverty. But at the same time, sport in the US can be a bit elitist as well. It is a dog eat dog world. There are some very talented kids who just give up. Um, and But it is what it is. I mean, sports culture and the way sports are organised are different between the US and Europe. Very very different. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. We have come off. I don't think we should have more pathways for universities into sports. We have Loughborough and a few other universities, but I think well. There is a good ice hockey league in regards to British universities. There's rugby union and all the major sports, field hockey. That's where a lot of our players who end up playing professionally go through the university system. So netball, there's a big university program there that is linked to the women's professional game in this country. So yes, there could be more. The National Sports Centre at Loughborough um, is, and obviously they got the swimming centre in Sheffield that's linked to the university, where all our swimmers go, and a lot of our ice hockey players play when it comes to qualifying games. There's a centre of excellence up in Sheffield with ice hockey and swimming as well and cycling. So there are various centres of excellence, St George's Park with football. So there are some pathways there. But when it comes to certain sports, yeah, universities, rowing, for example, cycling is more to do with, cycling is an interesting one because there's cycle clubs. Um, Rugby, both codes, you've got the grassroots clubs and then the various pyramids of the system, very similar to football. So there is a bit of university involvement. Um, at the same time, there's also academy involvement as well, where they scout the talent at youth level in their catchment areas. But there is a lot of university involvement, even with football. There are players who've gone to university who play non-league and then they end up in the professional ranks, whilst also getting an educational or work. In Jamie Vardy's case and Ricky Lambert's case, they were full-time employed whilst playing part-time football. So don't count out, you can still achieve your dreams, as they say. Um, if you're 15 or 16 in the UK and you're still, well, if you're going to be pretty good at sport, you're already scouted before then, age of 11. If 15, 16, it's different with both league and union. If you're good, you will you're good at playing rugby league or rugby union at school, you will be on the attention of scouts. Football, you're normally signed up with the youth system by the age of 11, and there's obviously the clubs outside of school. So with league and union in rugby and in football and in ice hockey, you've got the outside of school where you play the youth system. I've got friends who play the youth system in British ice hockey, British, rugby union, football, and they've ended up playing in the non-league or the lower leagues. Or one of my mates' case, he now plays for Bristol. He has played for Bath and London Irish. Not that I haven't kept in contact with him, unfortunately, but I've tried reaching out to him on social media over the years, but he's now doing his thing. But generally speaking, um, the school pathway system has a bearing, but most kids who are pretty good at sport, they're already signed up with a club outside of the education system. Um, and then they will get scouted by the bigger clubs who play at the professional levels when it comes to, oh, that guy's quite good, that guy's quite good. There is a bit of university involvement as well with some sports, but for the most part, if a kid's pretty good, he's already playing for a youth club or a minor club in regards to the community. They play a game against another club with a youth system. He gets scouted by another club, and it ends up where you go from the amateur to non-league to which is semi-pro to professional to the major leagues. Um, as time goes on, it's all about again when you're playing your position and you get scouted and um, but again, when it comes to rugby union, the fee-paying schools, the public schools as we call them, the private schools, scouts do turn up to games um, occasionally, um, but that's generally when the kids turn 16. There are rules against scouting when they're younger than that. Um, but for the most part, you're playing for rugby union. It's more to do with the education system than rugby league to a certain extent in the north of England. But most of the players in football league and to some extent union have actually played club rugby outside of the school system as well. But the education system has a bigger bearing on rugby union than other sports. But we should have more pathways. Um, yeah, I'm not overly keen on some aspects of the uh, North American franchise system um, because it doesn't necessarily set up these young men and in some cases women for a life should they not make it to the professional ranks of the sport they're going for. Um, and they get thrown on the scrap heap. I'm not overly keen on how that system works, but there's flaws with the European system as well. Um, I don't think there's any perfect sports development system because obviously they don't make it as sports stars. What are they going to do? No, field hockey is actually a professional sport. Netball is a professional sport as well, and basketball is a professional sport as well in this country now. They've all turned professional. They just get less exposure than other sports because in the UK it's football and then sliding scale, and in North America it depends on the league and the sports market and the city and the state or the province and how you're in as to the exposure that particular sport or sports gets. Um, but yeah, the universities play a bigger role in the more minority sports. Yes, they do. Um, but there could be more done at grassroots level to make some sports less elitist because there is still that perception that rugby union and cricket are tough sport, elite sport, upper middle class, private school educated, which is not necessarily the case if you look at the England team and you look at their backgrounds of players playing cricket and playing rugby union, look at the national sides where um, they went to school and how they became professionals. But there is still seen in the media that elitism, whereas in football, most of these young men haven't gone past school past the age of 16. Um, However, there's more emphasis now being put on kids if they do go through the ranks to get a better education. That wasn't always the case in years past. Um, but a lot of them, they haven't been given the skills to get by in the real world if they don't make it as a professional athlete, and that is a problem. And that's not just an issue that football faces or rugby union or rugby league. All sports face that. Um, yeah, they still technically classed as professional sports, and netball is doing quite well. Basketball is not doing as well as field hockey and netball. Not on the same standard of quality of players being produced by this country, um, in comparison to our European counterparts, but it's not on the same level. But yeah, the media deals and the TV deals could be a lot better. This is why the Gaelic Amateur Association sports in Ireland have stayed amateur. They are steadfastly, the GAA are steadfastly against professionalism at this point. At some point, the GAA will have to go professional if those sports are to survive long term and be viable long term. Um, but as things currently stand, the Gaelic Amateur Association are going to stay amateur. They're not going to go full time officially. Bring it out there officially. Unofficially, they're pretty much full time now, but officially they're amateurs, but unofficially we all know that the players train full time. So, um, like rugby union in the early 90s, they were basically full time. Um, by the time they turned professional, anyway, um, it just was officially professional in '95. But the signs have been there for a good 5 years prior that the sport was going to have to go professional in order to keep a good competitive balance across the sport. And we could argue about rugby union's professionalism, how it hasn't necessarily been as beneficial to the game as it should have been. And rugby league, while it's been classed as the professional of the two codes, back in the day, the players were still having full time jobs and full time professionals. It's only in more recent years, the last 30, 40 years, that the game has gone full time, full time. So, what, but yeah, as I say, some sports are at a crossroads in their direction and their development, their evolution, and finances. And then I believe one or two have played in the NBA, but I wouldn't be able to name them. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to name them. I know there are British-born players who've played in the NFL, the NHL, I believe in Major League Baseball as well. I think British-born players. When you say British, there have been British-born players playing in all the major leagues. British who hold a British passport who can represent the UK. Um, I believe there have been. I believe there's been one or two, but again, I wouldn't be able to name. There was one who was in the London 2012 Olympics. He was an NBA player. I think he's retired, but there have been one or two. But again, like basketball doesn't get the attention domestically for the domestic league. The NBA, yeah, there's a TV deal for the NBA. It, half the households in this country can watch it on the TV deal that's in place with the subscription company. The NBA does bring games to the UK in their European overseas series, like the NHL does, like the NFL and Major League Baseball do. Um, but the, there are fans here of the Major League sports, but I think I don't know. We the Great Britain team didn't do great at the Olympics, and the funding for basketball has been cut, so it doesn't get the funding it did before. So there was a funding injection before the Olympics in 2012, and since then the funding is gone. And some people criticise that. People were like, "Well, we're not very good at basketball anyway." There are other sports where we have more of a history in competing and being competitive and playing at the top level internationally when it comes to international tournaments that aren't the Olympics. We should focus more funding there to make us more competitive there. But we are a sportsman country, but I do think um, there are issues that need resolving. Basketball funding, um, whether it's justified to pump the money into a sport that's going to be a loss maker for, well, forever, it seems. It's it's not one of the sports that historically we're very good at, and I didn't enjoy it as playing it because I wasn't very good. Um, so I don't enjoy watching it. If that makes sense. I wasn't very good at school. It was one of the compulsory sports we had to play for a year. I didn't enjoy playing it. Um, I didn't like it at all. Uh, some other friends did like it. We did have basketball teams. We did. Um, but then, yeah, I mean, we had a lacrosse team for girls at one of my schools. But yeah, it's not one of those sports that's what you would call um, the quality isn't there. People play it and support it absolutely. I've got nothing against people playing and loving the game, but our sporting culture is the more physical team sports: association football, rugby union, rugby league, cricket, ice hockey, field hockey. They get more funding. Most of the leagues are professional. I think all those leagues are fully professional and have been for a long time. Uh, you know, football, rugby league, rugby union, cricket, we're ranked very highly in the world. Ice hockey, we're playing at the World Championship top level, and we're improving, and the quality's improved. And so, in that regard, the field hockey, we regularly win Olympic medals, and again, we're ranked quite highly. So those six sports, which are team sports, um, are streets ahead in participation. The talent pool we have is pretty solid. All those leagues are fully professional, have been for a long time. You could argue about the level of professionalism and the level of exposure and you know how good quality those leagues are domestically, but we've got players who play in those sports who play overseas and play at quite a high standard, um, especially in rugby union and uh, in football. Certainly at rugby league, we attract some pretty good overseas talent. Ice hockey, we get some ex NHL players and AHL players playing in our elite league. So we do get some pretty decent, admittedly near the end of their career talent, but we've had some pretty decent players in the history of British ice hockey who've come from the NHL, who played pretty good minutes in the NHL and been NHL regulars playing over here. Um, so we can attract the overseas talent, star players in all the sports. The fact that some of these professional leagues are having some difficulties, partly to do with COVID, but other issues long standing, is a concern. Um, but we've had a reputation of constantly producing talented players in those team sports. Basketball, not so much, and it's a long term trend that's been in place for a very long time. Um, People only started getting interested in about 2004 2005 when we won the Olympics and we had to put together a team for the Olympics. Suddenly, it got some funding, um, but unfortunately, and it is a shame, that funding hasn't continued, and the sport isn't developing quality level and the player level it should. Um, yeah, I mean, look, it's a professional league. It's just not one of the best. You go Greece. Look at the Greek league. It's terrifying. Look at the Italian league. Is quite good. All of the Eastern European leagues. They keep producing quality players that go and play in the NBA. Oh look, our hockey teams in all levels have got pretty solid fan bases, great youth setups, very community based, um, wide catchment areas. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, you could argue the media rights that the British Basketball League has in place aren't great. The player development, the youth level isn't great. It only really has attractive. It's only really attractive in certain cities and certain areas in those cities. Um, Outside of certain cities, it struggles. I mean, it's going to struggle in the north of England where you've got a split between football, rugby union, rugby league. Some towns will be league only, some towns will be football only, some towns will be rugby union only, and that is a fact in parts of north of England. Parts of the West Country, you've got rugby, football, and cricket. Um, Parts of the southeast, it's again rugby, ice hockey, football, and yeah, there's some rugby league clubs in the southeast and the Midlands um, that are established. Um, you'd be hard pressed to find, anywhere that isn't got a football club. Um, Even at the full amateur Sunday league, hard pressed any level. Rugby union across the UK, rugby league mostly in the north, although some in the Midlands and the southeast. Ice hockey is spread throughout the UK. Cricket, more of the rural areas have cricket clubs, but again spread without the UK. So basketball is facing a challenge where field hockey there's a lot of clubs spread without the UK. If there's an all weather surface, yeah, it is coming across more established sports that've got better funding, better youth participation, better national sides when you get to the senior level. Uh, yes, that was my local team. They were professional. They are now playing at another local arena because our rink is gone. Um, I've got all my jerseys in the wardrobe. Got my jersey over there. Got a couple of hoodies that are over on the side. So yeah, that was professional. That's a long time ago. That arena is now abandoned. It's fallen into disrepair. Um, the team is solid. They won the national championship uh, in 2000. Um, yeah, we've had some NHL players play for and against us. Uh, Former player coach was an AHL player for many years. His youngest son now plays for us. His elder son used to play for us, now plays for Swindon. Um, so we've had some pretty quality players who've played. Or we've had players who played in the World Championships. There's one player who played in the World Championships for Slovenia who played for us in his World Championship year. Yeah, I know. So we've had some pretty decent players. I think, but that's 4 years ago. That video is 4 years old, so almost as old as the channel itself. Yeah, that's an old video. That the arena is long since in disrepair and is not open anymore. The future is uncertain. Um, we'll see what happens with the site, but the ski slope's gone. I think the building's falling apart now. But that's to do with the ownership. The community were not very happy when all that came about. There was a lot of anger in the community aimed at local government and politicians. A lot of anger last year. Um, but, yeah. And that anger, that resentment's still there. A lot of resentment still there. So let's just move on from that sore topic. But we're not the only community to go through that issue. Glasgow's got issues with their rink as well. Yeah, the 3G, 4G pitch thing, AstroTurf is the way to go with field hockey, but it's what local authorities, for maintenance purposes, to cut cost. We're currently playing out of the Slough Ice Arena, so we're sort of exiled a little bit. We're floating around, but we're sharing an arena with another team. We play at a lower level. We're sharing these facilities now. Um, with some of our former local rivals in the Slough Jets. Don't even go there. Oh, it doesn't feel right playing out the Slough Ice Arena, but out of the hangar. But the hive is gone. The hangar is our home now. The bees have invested. There's a bee's nest in a aircraft hangar. There's all sorts of jokes. But a friend of mine used to play youth level for the Slough Jets. many years ago. I went to school with. Um, I think he played a few senior games with them as well. He had a nasty jaw. He was a goalie. Had a nasty jaw injury. But I've had friends who played for Basingstoke, Bracknell, Swindon, Slough. Um, so yeah, the sport is. I'm passionate about it. At the moment, logistically, getting to games is a bit difficult. Got to save some pennies up, hoping some friends might give me a birthday present. We've got the Guildford Flames, who used to play in the same league, now playing in the Elite League down the road. Good solid sides, good players played there. Um, the Pellinis follow the NHL. The Pellini brothers were born in Guildford. One of them plays in the NHL, one plays in the Elite League. They were born in Guildford. Their dad came as a Canadian, came over here to play. Um, I think it's Brendan Pellini plays in the Elite League. The younger Pellini brother played for the Arizona. I think he plays for Chicago now. He was born in Guildford. Um, but yeah, just find them on Twitter. Um, there's highlights packages posted. There's all sorts posted. But yeah, it's a shame what's happened. But again, facilities been run into the ground, and local government not really caring what happens. Chelsea Premier League champions, too early to tell. I think this season's going to be more open than previous seasons. The only reason I think Man City won the league last season because they had a good festive period. Other than that, the league was pretty even right up. Take out the festive period, Man City were pretty equal to like the rest of the league. It was just that end of November to end of January period where Man City found a way to win ugly when other teams were floundering over each other. I think this season going to be different. Um, we'll see what happens, but I think this season is going to be different. I think some players coming back from injury. Still concerns with Argentina and Brazil calling up players from the Premier League, considering it's on the red list of countries. Chelsea been Premier League champions. I think it's too early to tell. Not a fan of it. Not a fan of it. That's a populist move by the government to reverse the law on that. Especially for Scotland, there's a reason why drinking in Scottish football stadiums has been banned for 30 years. There was a very unsavoury incident at an Old Firm match 30 odd years ago or 40 odd years ago between Celtic and Rangers. Um, I'm not a fan of it. If they want to bring back safe standing, alcohol has to be kept out of the stadiums. Sorry, personal opinion. Football fans cannot behave when they're sober, let alone when they're pissed. Not just in this country, but also in Europe. I'm not a fan of it. Anyone with half a brain cell would not be a fan of it, but the government are trying to win public favour to disguise the fact they've completely mishandled a lot of things over the last 2 years, 3 years. Why? Because I mean, well, oh dear. I've got to describe hooliganism to an American. Um, in Europe, we have a thing where football fans get a bit tribal. When I say tribal, they like kicking the shit out of each other with weapons. Um, we invented it. The Europeans perfected it. We like basically battering the hell out of each other. There's a bit of racism in there. There's a bit of nationalism in there. Bit of left and right wing politics in there. If you live in Derbyshire and Northamptonshire, if you're a Mansfield Town fan, Chesterfield fan, yeah, there's a bit of politics behind it as well. Bit right wing, bit of left wing. Um, um, yeah, it's because football fans can't behave themselves. Rugby union and cricket, rugby league fans can't either, but ice hockey fans generally can. I have seen some nasty incidents where fans can't behave themselves, but it's not just a British thing. A lot of countries in Europe have very strict rules on alcohol in public places and in football stadium. Well, in stadiums, there are some very strict rules. It's not just a UK thing. There are some very, very strict rules in drinking in non-designated public places. Um, yeah, cricket. There has been some unsavoury incidents at cricket matches, both here and abroad. Not just by England fans either. Australian fans have been known to be quite nasty, both at home and abroad. They have been known to attack players. Seriously, read Phil Tufnell's Guide to Cricket and Phil Tufnell's Guide to the Ashes. Those two books. There are some tales of some rather unsavoury scenes, um, and yeah, um, When I was going to ice hockey matches at the old Bracknell ice rink, you could only drink upstairs, not downstairs, because that's where the youth area were. So the kids seating, the family areas, so you could only drink on the upper tier, partly because of licensing law as well, because downstairs didn't have an alcohol license, because you had to be within sight of the bar, which was upstairs. There were two bars upstairs. There was no bar downstairs. The restaurant did not have an alcohol license. It's completely separate. Yeah, so there was a rule there, and that's where the family seating areas were, and the youth kids zones were. So you couldn't really drink downstairs. People did it, but you weren't meant to. Football, yeah, you haven't been able to drink in the stands for years. Uh, yeah, cricket, it's more of a banter when you have like the Barmy Army and all that. It's seen in good jest. There's no malicious intent behind it. Um, Yeah, but I've noticed you Americans, you water your beer down. You could not handle European strength lager. I've seen it many times where where there's a pub I used to drink at, and we have full strength beer, right? Some of the beers on tap are like 8, 9% volume. A couple of Americans couldn't handle their beer and were hammered after 3 drinks. Where like me and my mates were like sinking these like they're water, going really. Um, but yeah, in North America, the beer's watered down, the percentage is weaker. Your average percentage is 3.5 to 4%. Over in Europe, you can get beers as strong as 10%. And I'm not joking. And some of the Eastern European beers can be as high as 15%. Our wine is stronger, our beer is stronger, our spirits are stronger. In the US, they water it down. It's to do with the legacy of prohibition. It's a legacy of prohibition, and it also means the brewers pay less tax because you pay more tax the more percentage your alcohol beverage is. So they deliberately water down their product. A, they sell more. B, it costs them less in tax. So it takes you more to get pissed. But when Americans are over here, they cannot handle the strength of the drink. Some of our ciders are like 15, 20%. And then you get to the spirits, and the European standard is between 35 and 45%. Um, but then some people have a home brewing license and microbrewing license. And then you can, some of the spirits, I've come across 88% vodka. I've come across 75% grappa, which is an Italian spirit, some raki, ouzo. Um, yeah, also in England and in most parts of Europe, yes, football hooligans, for the most part, can beat the shit out of each other without fear of getting gunned down by the police. South America, they fight anyway, even though they are going to get gunned down by the police because the police are all bent. But South America and European hooligans, Americans just don't understand. Like, you have to go on YouTube and type in hooligan fights, football hooligan fights, and you'll be stunned at how sports violence in the Middle East, Europe, and South America, and North Africa, so Morocco and Algeria and Tunisia, and Egypt. We not only do we like beat the crap out of each other, fans have been known to die in these riots. Like there was a reason why English clubs were banned from European football for 5 years, Liverpool for 6. The Hazel disaster, where yeah, there's been running battles like World Cup '98, Euro 2000, Euro 2016. There were some incidents at World Cup 2006 involving the Poles and the Germans went toe to toe at that one. There was some unsavoury incidents there. Um, oh, seltzers. Oh God, the seltzer. Oh God. Oh, I mean, I don't drink anymore. I used to be an alcoholic. So when I talk about addiction and mental health, I'm talking to an ex-addict. I don't drink anymore. I haven't drunk for a long time. Um, but when I was drinking a beer at 3.5%, I'd be like, there are some lagers we can get over here that are like 8 to 10%. They're called the special brews. Um, um, yeah, I'll give you that because they are brutal. Um, like I've seen Americans come over here and they buy Carlsberg Special Brew or Tennant Super 80. They're classed as hobo beers, so people are homeless. They are generally cheaper. A super strength lager, one can, your mates are going to be shit faced. Um, there is a reason why I have concerns about the government, both in Scotland and in England, relaxing the sale on alcohol and the stadium ban on alcohol when it comes to football. There's a reason why that rule is in place. It does not apply to other sports, I think, apart from rugby league, the stadium ban on alcohol sales. Um, it's because the trouble that goes with it. And it does get quite nasty, gets quite violent. Uh, oh God, yeah, oh yeah, going to a Dallas Cowboys game, you're gonna get shot. Um, no, I've seen footage of fan fights in US stadiums. I don't think you're allowed to bring your firearm in to a stadium facility. Probably in your vehicle, yes, but I think you have to leave your firearms at the door before you enter. You won't get through the metal detectors. You will be thrown out. Even in Texas, which has an open carry policy, Texas is open carries. They have to have it visibly on show, and I don't think you're allowed it inside a sports venue. I've got a friend who lives in Texas. I've got a friend who lives in Miami. I think you're not allowed to bring a firearm into a sports venue. It's not allowed. Um, um, but I wouldn't want to be a Giants fan at a Cowboys game. In fact, I wouldn't want to be a sports fan at any Texas sporting event because you know in the car park you're going to get shot. No, I think Texas sports fans are actually they're probably more pissed at their team losing than the opposition fans. I think Texas is one of those really unique states in the US that's got a very mixed uh, background of people. You've got Hispanics, you've got Afro Americans, you've got whites, the big cities with the oil industry. Oh no, I've been to you know over here. I mean, I've gone through South London after an ice hockey match with my mate, and it was an experience. I was like, let's get on the train, let's fuck off. My mate was shitting himself, and I was like, they're not interested in us. Why? We're wearing sports, we're wearing hockey jerseys. The ice rink is down there. The local games aren't interested in us. And he was like, why? Because they're not interested in us. Why? Well, firstly, Sam, you're not mixed race black or well, you are white, but um, you're not a rival gang. You've already got your weed on you, so they're not going to be interested in that because you're already smoking it. So they're going to see that as normal. And we're wearing our hockey jerseys and we're the away team. They're not interested in us. There's a pub there. And we went to the pub for 4 hours, got pissed up, went to the game, had a laugh, got on the train back home, got stoned, went to bed. But I went, I was in a very, what the Brixton High Road, as it's called, is one of the most dangerous roads in South London. In Streatham High Road, Brixton High Road is what it's called. Depends where you are in South London, the borough of Southwark, um, just south of the River Thames. Very dangerous area. Uh, as we left the train station and walked to the ice rink, there had been a stabbing. As we were walking back, there had been a shooting. And my mate Sam was like, "Shall we get out of this?" I said, "We are fine, mate." And he didn't believe me. I went, "No, it's totally fine." We almost got in a punch up on the train on the way home with a gangbanger who wanted to give me a load of grief, and I basically threatened to rip his face off. And my mate Sam was like, "Please calm down." And I was like, "No, I'm going to kill the cunt." By this point, my jersey was off, I was shirtless, and I was very drunk and very angry. And some of my tattoos are gang related. Not because I'm not in their world. My mate Sam is not in their world. Um, my mate Sam is just he's a chef. But I spent a lot of time in London. I have friends who are unfortunately in the gang world. So I know a little bit about I know a fair bit about actually I know a lot about the wrong side of the tracks. And I'm being honest. I have got friends who are actively involved in sadly. And I do say a lot. I understand the reasons why. I would rather they didn't, and I would rather like there was more opportunities for them not to have to break the cycle of gang culture. But deprivation, and again, the facility that Lambeth and Southwark Council has done for Streatham Ice Rink is brilliant, and there were people from all backgrounds and all communities watching the game we went to that night. But there is still a lot of deprivation in that area of London. Um, it's not a very pleasant walk from the station to the ice rink. It's not a very long walk. It's about 3 minutes. it's just not a very pleasant walk, especially if you've never been to London before. That can be rather disconcerting. Um, it's not the most pleasant area to get lost in, and I've been going to London for years. I've never had any problems in London ever. Um, got a lot of friends who live in London, uh, but if you're not knowledgeable locally about the local issues, you want to be very, very careful where you go. Um, my mate Sam was like, and my mate Sam is not like, how do I put it, naive. He's a bit older than me. He's seen, he's worked in pubs and bars. He's seen people get stabbed and shot. He was like, broad daylight. Oh, there's gangs everywhere. It's like, well, don't draw attention to the fact you know that guy's a gang member, especially as there's police over there, and he's then very likely to do something. We, the pub we went in was lovely, but then there was a birthday party for a gang member's wife, or missus or something. And my mate Sam got a bit uncomfortable, and then they asked for the TV to be changed. And Sam was going to want to change it back. Sam, leave it. He was like, why? Because they're gang members. I was like, I want to change it back. I said, no, don't. I had to tell him not to ask to have the TV changed back. Bar staff were like, because they knew what he was going to do, and I got hold of one of the waitresses, and I was like, "Can we have the check, please?" Because we had ordered a bite to eat as well. And she came up and said, "Thank you for not changing the TV channel over." I was like, "It's fine." And there was sport on, and they changed it to a different sport that we weren't watching. And my mate Sam was like, "Fuck's sake!" I was like, it was a shush moment. But yeah, no. Getting back to the drinking at football, I'm against the change. They want to bring safe standing back. I'm not. I'm I'm guarded, and I've been to some not very pleasant away days. As a neutral, I've seen some pretty well, we'll call it tame by 1980s standards, but I've seen some nasty stuff. Um, I've you know yeah, the away fans in Reading have to go to the Three Guineas pub by the train station. I've seen it there where it gets nasty there as well. Uh, Tailgate? No, no, no. We don't have that kind of culture. We just get on we rent buses and coaches and minibuses, bundle into mates' cars, hop on the trains. It's more like you go with your lads. You don't have the barbecue culture in the car park. You just bundle on whatever public or private transport you get your hands on. You get to the game. You get steamed up. You have a punch up. You go home. That's pretty much the football culture. Um, yeah, you just I've done away days with the rugby union, football, ice hockey. You just get any means of transport to get to the game and then get home from the game. It's all about the journey. Sometimes the tailgate culture is an American thing. It's not a European thing. Not at all. Doesn't exist over here. Uh, it's not in. It's not a thing. Having the barbecue in the back of a pickup. It's not a thing. Um, our culture is you figure out how to get to the game. There's enough away fans, you sort of group together. Be it if you're part of the firm or you're just you're wearing your shirt, you group together. You're loud, you're proud. There's segregation before matches. There's segregation in the stadium. That's always been the case. Fans are segregated home and away. Um, there's all depending on who's playing. The police presence can be in the hundreds of, if not thousands, of police officers. Again, it depends, who's playing. If it's Millwall West Ham, that gets nasty. People have died at the games. If it's Blackburn Burnley, gets nasty. Crystal Palace Brighton the other night got very nasty on and off the field. People go Crystal Palace Brighton. That's a derby match. Oh no, there is hatred within that rivalry. Southampton Portsmouth, Southampton Bournemouth, Bournemouth Portsmouth. Any of the South Coast teams playing each other, it gets kind of nasty. XT Yeovil is one of those ones where it has been known to get quite violent. Um, Huddersfield, Barnsley, Huddersfield, Leeds, Huddersfield, Bradford, Bradford, Barnsley. Any of the Yorkshire clubs playing each other gets quite nasty. Sunderland, Newcastle, historically, obviously the Old Firm, uh, Rangers, Celtic. In fact, anyone versus the Old Firm. Hibs, Hearts, that's sectarian. Rangers, Celtic, sectarian. Aberdeen, um, Motherwell can get nasty. Dundee and Dundee United, they share the same ultras. They share the same firm, which is quite interesting. So there's no rival. There's just friendly rivalry there. No, we can't. It's not advised. Not advised. If it's happened with me before, where um, we've had one of us has had to hide our identity in our jersey or our allegiance and stay pretty quiet throughout the game. Um, yeah, it's not necessarily the most advisable thing to. As a Blackburn fan, my granddad was a Burnley fan. I've had to sit in a Burnley stand, and I stupidly was duped into going to this game, and I was wearing the wrong jersey, and I was lucky to not be. I was lucky to get out of the stadium. I was lucky to get to the car park. In fact, I was lucky to get out of Watford. Um, I was lucky to get to the M40. Yes, I was lucky to get out of the stand, let alone out of the area. No, I've seen some pretty yeah. I've seen some nasty. I've seen a Brentford Fulham game. Admittedly, the clubs were in different leagues at the time. It was an FA Cup game. That was interesting atmosphere. Um, I've seen a Brentford QPR game as well, and a QPR Fulham game. I've seen some of the West London derbies that don't involve Chelsea, and they were, Fulham, they're the posh, they're the posh Chelsea fans, aren't they? No, there is an element there with Fulham. There is an element, small, but there is there. But when it comes to Brentford and QPR, they ain't got nothing on them. Um, but it does get, yeah, there is a nasty element with English football. It's never fully gone away. Um, but yeah, you get segregated. It's similar when it comes to the ice hockey and rugby league as well. Rugby union and cricket, you're not segregated. Rugby league, football, ice hockey, you are, and it's unfortunate. Whereas in North America, yeah, you can sit with your mate and just take the verbal abuse, but um, yeah, European sporting culture, you don't want to be in the wrong stand or the wrong section because you're not getting out of there. Yeah, you're in trouble. Um, if you want to experience it as a neutral, then absolutely, I do recommend going to a European of any, doesn't matter if it's UK or mainland Europe, going to a sporting event and just see how the the what we call the ultras of the firm, the hardcore support, how they operate. It is something that I don't think has quite the Americans have quite grasped the concept of how crazy European and South American sports fans are. I do recommend, if you can, Europe would be a lot safer than South America for an American to go to. Try and just absorb a European sporting event with the atmosphere because it's never quiet. It's just constant. Doesn't matter if it's football, rugby union to a point, rugby league, ice hockey. It's constant. It's constant from the first minute to the final minute. It's just constant. It doesn't matter if it's 500 people at the game to 50,000, 60,000. It's constant. And you'll also have fans giving the players a fair bit of fair bit of a spray, fair bit of chirping. You definitely it's some of the chanting and the atmosphere and the energy. It's something that you won't see in America. Again, go on YouTube, look it up. You will be stunned, stunned. Um, absolutely, like you could not. Um, there is no comparison. The energy levels, it's just constant, constant, constant. You just do not get it in the North American sports. You just don't get it. You just and yeah, it's really tribal. I have been to Craven Cottage. Uh, you don't want it snowing at Craven Cottage because the pitch will freeze in the corner. They have issues with undersoil heating and the pitch freezing. I've been to Craven Cottage, so before they rebuilt the main stand on the cottage side. I've been there many times. I've got a few friends, and my brother-in-law is a Fulham fan. Not that I get on with him, and a few of my friends are Fulham fans as well. So I've been to Craven Cottage with friends and family many times. The pitch does freeze. You don't want it with a light snow because you cannot play. There is one corner which never gets enough sunlight to defrost. Even with the undersoil heating, it will still freeze. And it's also on the Thames floodplain, so the underground groundwater, it does have issues with drainage as well. It's right on the bank of the Thames. I've been to Craven Cottage, I've been to Loftus Road, I've been to the old Brentford Griffin Park, I've been to the Day Ski, I've been to Vicarage Road, St Mary's, Fratton Park. Where else have I been? I've been somewhere else. Anfield. Been to Anfield. I've been to Twickenham. I've been to several. I've been to where else have I been? Yeah, that's the stadiums I've done. I think I've been to Streatham Ice Rink, Swindon Ice Rink, Basingstoke Ice Rink, of course, the old Bracknell Ice Rink. I will be going to the Slough Ice Arena soon. I think I'm going to message my mate for my birthday, see if we can organise a night of hockey. Yeah, no, they have issues with when it snows defrosting the corner of the pitch. I think they might have relayed the surface and put undersoil heating in the last ground redevelopment, but they have had issues in the past of games being postponed because they can't defrost the pitch. And I'm not joking on that. They have had issues with the playing surface before, and it's in the corner where the cottage is. Where the stands meet, they don't get enough sunlight, especially in winter and autumn when there's a frost or snow for that part of the pitch to be defrosted. It has happened. Whether that's still an ongoing issue, I don't know, but in the past it has been. Um, and you're right by the Thames, so you get that microclimate. You're right on the river, so it does create a microclimate where a fog can come off the Thames and come across the stadium, which gets really interesting. Same at Fratton Park, where it's right on um, Fratton Island, which is Portsmouth basically, and it's not too far from the the docks, and you get the sea fog coming. I've seen that happen at Fratton Park, Portsmouth during games where you can't actually see the players because there's a fog coming, and the floodlights are struggling, and they've had to stop the game for 5 minutes while the fog blows over. Yeah, it rugby, Twickenham, cricket, Lords, um, and the Medeski as well. When yeah. Um, I want to go to the Oval. It's just easier to get to for me. I'm on the main line to London, which goes right to Vauxhall, so I can get a train to the Oval and just walk from Vauxhall to the Oval. I've been to Lords. Get on at Ealing Broadway, get out at Marylebone. Um, so I've done that. I would like to go to the Oval. I think the Oval is a brilliant facility. I really do. I want to go to the Oval for a Test match. But again, it's in that part of South London that is actually surprisingly not very nice. Um, there are a few other stadiums I want to go to, but um, I've done a fair few. At the moment, there's nothing particularly on my list to do as things stand. There's things I would like to do, but it's not on the bucket list. I think I've done, Premier League, I've done FA Cup, I've done Football League, um, I've done Test matches, I've done Cup finals. So I I've done double headers at Twickenham. I've done my fair share of tick the box. It is an experience being at some of these bigger stadiums. I prefer some of the slightly smaller stadiums. personally, but it is an experience. Um, and if you've never done it before, I would recommend it. At least research what stadium and what teams you want to watch, and just go as neutral and just enjoy the occasion. If you're very passionate about the teams that are playing, then obviously you go with the team you support. But absolutely, just um, go as a fan. Absolutely, never done it before. It's so much different than watching on TV or on an internet stream. It's so much different watching it actually in the flesh than watching on TV or the internet. Completely different. Spine tingling different, in my opinion. Um, so I would recommend absolutely. It does. I like what they've done with Brentford. They have a plan. Admittedly, obviously, COVID delayed them finishing the stadium off. But the old Griffin Park was falling apart. It was just you couldn't expand on Griffin Park. You would have to. The site was too small. It was not in great condition. The playing surface would struggle in winter. The new stadium was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It's a fantastic facility. They've got that facility right, whereas Tottenham, I think, have got their facility wrong in the style. There was nothing really wrong with the old White Hart Lane. It was just stupidity on Levy's part and the owner's part. Um, uh, they completely, yeah, that was over budget. It was delayed. There was legal challenges. There were planning application issues. They just rotated the stadium 90 degrees. They rotated it on the axis 90 degrees. So I don't get why they did that. But yeah, the new Brentford Stadium is a beautiful looking facility. From what as modern stadiums go, they've done a very good job with Brentford Stadium. Very good job. Um, Not as soulless as other modern stadiums are, um, which is a lot of criticism that a lot of modern stadiums get. Is they're very soulless. You're too far from the pitch. There's no real soul to them. There's no. They've got naming rights, and fans are. I don't particularly feel, But with Brentford Stadium, I think aesthetically it looks very very nice. And I think whoever designed that, 10 out of 10. It's a beautiful looking facility. Absolutely beautiful looking facility. Um, no doubt on that. 10 out of 10 for what they've done there. Um, they've really done a good job with that stadium, um, and they're winning games as well. They're playing really well, so it's having a positive impact on the team itself. I think, but yeah, yeah. I mean, well, actually, it's been not too bad. It's actually September. It's still what's the temperature now? What's it predicted today? It was double figures overnight. We haven't had a frost yet. We haven't had it go below to single figures in degrees Celsius. Obviously, you use Fahrenheit in the US. It's currently 13 degrees Celsius. I think that's a lie. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, so I'm going to check because I do actually have it. No, it's all in Celsius on this weather app. Yeah, summer was officially over a week ago. It's still double figures though. It's still quite pleasant outside. I've got my window open. It's that warm. It's too warm for my heating to turn on. So it's still warm enough for the heating not to come on automatically. We've had some pretty deep. I mean, this time last year we had a very similar conditions where it was deceptively good weather, and then the first week of October we had the heaviest rain I think I've seen in about five, 4 or 5 years in one night, and then it just rained and flooded. And then for 6 months we have a water pump, we have a sewage and water pumping station by the railway line, and for 6 months, every night for 6 months, there were these tanker lorries pumping out the excess water and pumping fresh water in to pump blockages through. And um, uh, we had snow at the beginning of April this year, and I've put that footage on the other channel. We had snow in April, and my ex girlfriend was sending me footage of like up in Oxford where she lives of snow and hail, and I'm like, well, and it was really really cold. Um, and yeah, we had snow all the way through. We had wow, 5 degrees Celsius upstate New York. I don't know what that. I think that's about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, 50 degrees Fahrenheit. I can't remember. I think it's about 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Surely not that warm. That does surprise me, but um, it is what it is. It's just going to get cold very, very quick. You're going to get frosts overnight. Obviously, you call it fall, we call it autumn. Um, yeah, it's the temperatures are going to start dropping very, very quickly. But October here can be in the mid 20s, and we are predicted to have a batch of decent weather here. So it all depends how cold it gets at night. But it's only at 13, 14 degrees right now, which I think that's about right actually. It's looking about that, but it hasn't. We haven't had. It's been weird because September's been remarkably not that much rain. I've been off work ill, so I haven't been at work since the end of July. Um, I've been signed off. In July, beginning of August is when I had my last motorcycle accident. So I haven't been at work for about 6 weeks. I've been off work ill. Um, and I've got to get another doctor's appointment sorted out, and I've got to have my medication sorted out and other things. But September hasn't was much like last year. It was warmer than August at times. There were times in August where it was a bit naff. Um, but no, the last 2 summers have been really interesting. Last summer was just brutal. Um, we broke some records the last two out of the last 3 years. We've broken some. I think no, 2018 we broke a heat record. 2019 we broke a heat record. 2020 we broke a heat record at times of the year. We had the hottest February day on record or March day on record. Was it last year? Yeah, it was last year. We had the hottest Easter on record. This year we've had the driest February on record, I believe, but we had a lot of snow. We had snow, it didn't rain, it snowed. Snow versus rain is different in how they work out precipitation. Um, but we're due to have some pretty decent weather this October. So we'll see what the next couple of days and weeks bring. We will see. I don't know what it's going to bring. It's we'll see what happens. Yeah, yeah, it is what it is. But anyway, I'm going to get going because I've been online now for 3.5 hours. I need to get some lunch because I'm absolutely starving. I also need to do some shopping because I need to get some bits and pieces as well. But thank you very much, obviously, for all your questions. We discussed a lot of stuff, a lot of interesting stuff, and I'll also have to obviously keep up to date on what's happening with the NRL. There is an ongoing investigation. That'll be interesting to see what the outcome is with the integrity unit and what fines and suspensions these players end up getting. Thank you very much for your questions. I really appreciate it, and I'll have some more videos for you very, very soon.